18th anniversary of the terror attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, and the crash of United Airlines Flight 93 into a field in rural western Pennsylvania. Here in Brookline, the Brookline Fire Department, like fire departments across the Commonwealth, held a moment of silence at 9:55 a.m. on September 11th, and a special ceremony here in Brookline was held at Fire Station 5 in honor of Brookline native Manuel Del Valle, Jr. Del Valle, whose stepbrother is a Brookline firefighter, Peter Moyer, died while racing into one of the World Trade Center towers to save people while serving as a New York City firefighter. A bench was dedicated to Manny's memory on the front lawn of Station 5 in Coolidge Corner in 2011. And every year there's a ceremony at that bench. I want to use the occasion of the anniversary of 9/11 to remember those who died, including over 200 Massachusetts residents and 8 people that we know of with Brookline ties, and to reflect upon the lessons of tragedies like 9/11 that will enable us to respond with moral strength and compassion instead of fear and hatred. The people with Brookline ties that died that day that we know of, there may be others, are Christine Barbuto, 32 years old, a Brookline resident; Kelly Ann Booms, 24, a Brookline resident; John Brett Cahill, 56, who was born in Brookline but was a resident of Wellesley; Manuel Del Valle, Jr., a 1988 graduate of Brookline High School, a New York City firefighter assigned to Engine 5, one of the first fire companies to respond to the attack; Gerald P. Dewan, 35, a West Roxbury native and third-generation firefighter. His brother, Jack Dewan, served for many years as a Brookline firefighter. Gerald Dewan was a New York City firefighter who was one of the first responders on September 11th. Carlton Fife, 31, a Brookline resident; Lisa Gordenstein, 41. She lived in Needham but graduated from Brookline High School in 1977. And finally, Daniel C. Lewin, 31, a Brookline resident. According to the tab, he was reportedly stabbed on Flight 11 as it was hijacked, making him the first victim of the attacks. To me, this is evidence that the passengers on that flight also heroically resisted the hijackers, although I don't recall that being in any news reports. I'd also like to do something else. I'd like people to reflect on the lessons of that day that speak to our values, not our fears. Despite continuing Islamophobia in America and even here in Brookline, approximately 60 innocent Muslims are known to have died in the attacks. Of course, that's excluding 19 terrorists. I want to mention 2 of those Muslim individuals with a nearby connection to give a face to those victims who are also often victimized themselves by ignorant fears. This is from a story in USA Today in 2010, where we learn of a Newton, Massachusetts couple who lost their daughter, Rama, who was 7 months pregnant, and Rama's husband, Michael, who were passengers in the jet that crashed into the North Tower. Rama's father was Yusuf Salih, who with his wife Halima lived in Newton, and in 2010 owned 2 bakery cafes. After 9/11, several of their Muslim relatives were barred from international flights and almost missed the memorial service for Rama and Michael. Halima felt compelled to tell reporters, "We would like people to know that we are Muslims, and my daughter and son-in-law were Muslims. They were victims too." Unfortunately, some Americans allow their fears to blame 1 billion Muslims in the world for the acts of the few who pulled off the attack on 9/11. George Bush, former president, for all of his faults, had the answer to that fear in a speech he made at the Islamic Center in Washington, D.C., 6 days after the attack. And I'm reading this because, from today's perspective, some of the things that even George Bush did look very, very good and decent. Not taken away from the things that we don't like about George Bush. But he said, these acts of violence against innocents violate the fundamental tenets of the Islamic faith, and it's important for my fellow Americans to understand that. The English translation is not as eloquent as the original Arabic, but let me quote from the Quran itself. Quote, in the long run, evil in the extreme will be the end of those who do evil. For that they rejected the signs of Allah and held them up to ridicule. Close quote. He continued, the face of terror is not the true faith of Islam. That's not what Islam is all about. Islam is peace. These terrorists don't represent peace. They represent evil and war. When we think of Islam, we think of a faith that brings comfort to 1 billion people around the world. Billions of people find comfort and solace and peace. And that's made brothers and sisters out of every race, out of every race. America counts millions of Muslims among our citizens, and Muslims make an incredibly valuable contribution to our country. Muslims are doctors, lawyers, law professors, members of the military, entrepreneurs, shopkeepers, moms and dads, and they need to be treated with respect. In our anger and emotion, our fellow Americans must treat each other with respect. Women who cover their heads in this country must feel comfortable going outside their homes. Moms who wear cover must not be intimidated in America. That's not the America I know. That's not the America I value. Now, his statement was longer than that, but I thought those words were really relevant to today's world, especially the type of values that we cherish here in Brookline. So we should heed the words of President Bush in our current times of demonization of Muslims, immigrants from Central America and elsewhere, and others, and reach out to them with compassion and support as our way of honoring those who died on September 11, 2001. So can we have a moment of silence to remember and reflect? Okay, thank you. Yep, more announcements. Anyone have announcements?
I have two announcements. Okay. First, I just want to remind the board and the public that this Sunday is Brookline Day. Mm-hmm. That's September 22nd. And according to brooklineday.org, that is 4 hours, 4 days, 5 hours, 15 minutes, and 20 seconds away. So I'm excited. Festivities between 11 and 3 p.m., and there is a road race in the morning. So again, for more information about the details of when and where, brooklineday.org is a good place to start. And then second...
Can I add one thing?
Absolutely.
Bring your water bottles, because our water truck will be there. You don't need to bring plastic water bottles. We have water, great tasting water for you. Sorry.
I want to make the board and I think the public, perhaps more importantly, aware that the kickoff, the organizational meeting of the Pierce Building Committee is going to take place tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Here in Town Hall in the school committee room on the 5th floor. This is obviously a project that's engendered a lot of passion and interest from members of the public, and the building committee will be kicking off its proceedings again tomorrow morning. I anticipate it'll be a quick meeting, one where we introduce ourselves, get a sense of the timeline that we're operating under, and start the process of designing and the building and engaging with the MSBA. So 8 a.m. tomorrow here in Town Hall on the 5th floor.
Okay, anyone else?
So the Brookline Community Aging Network, BCAN, is having an event this Thursday at the Senior Center from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. And I have been informed that our work on the Kent Street Senior Affordable Housing project is receiving an award. So I will be accepting on the town's behalf.
As well as the Climate Action Committee.
Oh, excellent.
So I also wanted to let the public know that in conjunction with Mothers Out Front and Climate Action Brookline and Climate Action Committee and the Brookline's new working group on green electricity, we're ratcheting up our efforts to inform and encourage Brookline residents to opt up to 100%. We have a competition with Newton. You've probably heard us talk about that before. So we're engaging in a kind of old-fashioned political campaign. It won't be as intense, obviously, but we have signs that were delivered today, door knockers also delivered today. We're having a meeting on Thursday night. It will be after the BCAN award ceremony, 7:15 in the Denny Room at the Health Department. And we'll be getting ourselves organized, so hopefully you will all see some of these signs and have the door knockers on your doors as people come around and encourage you to opt up to 100%. This is the simplest and easiest way to make a contribution, a positive contribution to climate action in this town and in this state and in the country. It's really very, very easy. Will take you 5 to 10 minutes at the most if you haven't done it already. So we're happy to help figure out if you want to give me a call, or we'll give you some literature about how to actually do it. And we'll have a presence at Brookline Day as well. So let's hope we can have, in our friendly competition with Newton, let's hope we come out on top.
Sure. Briefly, I want to announce that our Small Business Development Committee got underway this morning. If you go to the website, our photos are already up there. We are on this. So I do want to say also that the schedule of our meetings is also posted. If you go to the Brookline website and then to boards and commissions and just find the Small Business Development Committee, you'll see that our meetings are there. We welcome the public to those meetings, and we'll also always make time for public comment as well. So if you're interested in small business development, please check out the schedule and do come out and join us. Second, a separate committee, the Boylston Street Corridor Study Committee, is still seeking applications. So once again, if you go to the Brookline site and you go to boards and commissions, you will see an application there. If you're interested, we are going to be continuing the work that residents have already started around visioning that section of Boylston Street that starts just over here in Brookline Village and goes to around where like Ruffalo Cafe is and that stretch there. So if that's of interest to you, we're particularly interested, although it's not limited to residents who live in the area, we are particularly interested in folks who also live in that area will be directly impacted by the kind of visioning that we have for that space. Those are the two things. And then finally, I'm still sitting here thinking about what the chair opened up with, and so thank you for making those comments. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Anything else?
I'll piggyback on something that Select Board Member Fernandez just said. The Electronic Communication Committee is also looking for applicants, so we welcome any and all comers. A variety of perspectives is what we're after, so please don't be shy.
Okay, so I see that our local cannabis businesses are going to be the subject of discussion at the public comment section. So I'd like to sort of make a statement regarding a meeting we held with NETA on September 6th to actually discuss many of the complaints that neighbors in the Brookline Village neighborhood have brought to the attention of the board, as well as NETA, as well as other town departments. We met with them along with the police chief, police superintendent, and the lieutenant responsible for cannabis enforcement, and NETA's legal counsel, vice president for operations, and their president. We talked about the complaints that have come to our attention, many of which we have to solve, not just for the Netta area, but also for the upcoming cannabis establishment on Beacon Street, Sanctuary, and any future establishments that we license here in Brookline. Remember, 60% plus of Brookline residents voted to bring cannabis, recreational cannabis, to Massachusetts. Nowhere on the ballot does it say, except for in my neighborhood. No one wants, apparently a lot of people don't want a cannabis establishment next to them near their neighborhood, but the fact is, we have these establishments in town, and the role of the board is through our rulemaking as well as general enforcement of those rules to ensure that the problems that accompany almost any business opening up in town are addressed and reduced to the extent possible. We have no silver bullet, but this board is listening and addressing issues that can be addressed in the most robust fashion possible. The things that received the most complaints were litter in the Brookline Village area, and let me just say that the town is going to be addressing that along with Netta with additional trash receptacles in that area, as well as Netta using their own employees to go out and pick up litter and ensure that their operations create a minimal problem in that regard. Among the issues that people are really upset about are, and this is kind of disgusting, but public urination and public consumption. These are problems that require increased police enforcement, and the town is committed to providing the resources to actually do that, to reduce to zero, if possible, those problems in Brookline. One of the things that was most concerning to people in Brookline Village was public consumption and just loitering at the Boylston and Emerson playgrounds. When Sanctuary opens on Beacon Street, that's going to be an issue at the Griggs Park, as well as there's a triangular park at Vernon and Park Street, whose name no one knows. At least I don't.
St. Mark's Park.
Oh, St. Mark's Park. Okay, let me write that down. As well as other areas around there that we will have to ensure that we have police enforcement to ensure that people are not loitering, and particularly people are not consuming cannabis in those areas. The fact that there will be people on the streets who are customers of Netta or of Sanctuary is really nothing that we can change. People have a right to use the public streets. We just have an obligation to ensure that their use of the public streets don't violate any of our rules or regulations or laws. There's a vaping controversy, as everyone knows about. We talked to Netta about that. They sell vaporizing cartridges and batteries, which they say they manufacture with Cannabis Control Commission oversight. And as you probably know, many of the problems with vaping equipment relate to unregulated equipment that's on the black market. Doesn't mean that regulated equipment needs to be monitored carefully and to ensure that they don't create health hazards. But the main problem probably is the unregulated items. Dr. Jett issued a release on September 12th, I believe is on the Health Department's website, where he discusses this and cautions the Brookline community about dangers associated with vaping. I urge people to read that. Policing. The town is committed to providing the necessary police enforcing of violations of our rules and state laws with respect to public consumption, public urination, parking violations, et cetera, as necessary. We're committed to doing that. Through the host community agreement, the town receives a significant amount of money. Those funds can be used to mitigate many of the problems that people have identified in the Netta area, as well as with the upcoming sanctuary establishment. And you can be assured that the town will be taking those concerns very seriously, and will use the funds that we have available to mitigate any problems that arise. A lot of other issues that I'm sure some of the public comments will address, but just wanted to give a sense of the things that the town is doing, taking very seriously the concerns that people have in communities where there are or will be cannabis establishments. The board is going to schedule in the near future a meeting with respect to Netta and particularly parking issues, but it'll also open up to other issues that the community wants to talk about. That'll be an opportunity for, in a public hearing type setting, won't be a public hearing, but a public hearing type setting, for people to express their views and help us to come up with solutions to problems that they have identified. You also should know that the Select Board has the opportunity to change its licensing requirements on an ongoing basis, and as we identify issues that need correction or improvements with respect to the licensing, we will make those fixes. That's my statement regarding how seriously we're taking people's concerns and our attempts to address the issues that can be addressed in a way that is reasonable and addresses the real big problems we have. So with that, I see that we have a few public comments. Jen Veritan.
Hi, my name's Jen Burton. Thanks for giving me some time today. I'm a mom of two. My kids are here, Lila and Braun. We moved to Coolidge Corner about 10 years ago from New York City. We specifically chose Brookline because it's community spirit, it's safe, it's focused on education. I'm not opposed to legalization. I'm not opposed to recreational marijuana or sanctuary even. I'm concerned about the host agreement, how lax it is, and how it can jeopardize the many reasons why I and many others probably here moved into Brookline. As you know, the license has been conditionally approved. I'm here to express disapproval of the outlet and ask you to ensure the following conditions are met before it opens. Now, I know you mentioned litter, public urination, public consumption. What I want to talk about today is some serious public health issues that I think we want to prevent by a stronger host agreement, not address after they happen. First, we must ban vape pens and related products. Must I remind you that opioids were approved by the FDA, right? So just because they have a stamp of approval by the Cannabis Commission or others doesn't mean they're safe. We should take precaution, particularly since we have 6 deaths on our hands. A national epidemic is unfolding before our eyes. We should be extra conservative, not lenient in the beginning. Second, edibles must be banned. Edibles are sold in form factors and with flavors that appeal to children. Examples include gummies and candy, and cookies even. Imagine my kids going on a play date, and some parents may have left them out, or they're in the cupboard and by accident they ingest them. That is a real concern. There's no reason why we have to be lenient on that particular point, particularly in the beginning. I think we should be strict, and then over time, think about loosening those restrictions. But in the beginning, there's no reason to allow those to be sold. Third, you had mentioned we can't control customers who are frequenting sanctuary, but what you can do is control the volume and the frequency. Our neighboring town of Newton, which I think we just talked about, it's a friendly competition. They are opening stores and they are mandating by appointment only. I don't know why we're not doing that. It seems like a common sense measure to control the volume of people out on the sidewalk and who could be publicly consuming or urinating, right? So we do have control over that. Pot shops are new in Massachusetts. They're new in the US. There's still a lot we don't know. There's no reason to go fast. We should go slow. I think even with these restrictions, there's enough revenue to go around. I know that's a big burden for the town right now. Everyone wants revenue. There's enough money to be made, even with these restrictions. So my job as a mother is to protect my kids. Your job as the select board is to protect our town. I ask you to do that now, and I ask you to do your job. Thank you.
Tim Byrne.
You guys as well, there's petitions up here to sign.
Hi, my name is Tim Byrne. I'm a longtime Brookline resident, about 6 years in the Coolidge Corner area. I support Jennifer's comments about potentially changing some of the host agreement as new evidence about products comes available. But I also wanted to speak about a little bit of pushback about your sense of support for the recreational dispensaries that are coming into Brookline. I know I've heard it several times that you feel like the support because of the ballot is 60-40 in support of it. I have to tell you, we've developed a small organization called Concerned Citizens of Coolidge Corner. We've done a bit of canvassing. We're starting to get an idea sort of what people's feelings are about, particularly the new one, the sanctuary one. I can just report that from many people that I've spoken to, there's a bit of a disconnect between the support that you seem to feel there is because of the ballot. And I think it has to do really, and I think you know this, you're on legal ground because, you know, the way the ballot was worded, when you voted for legalization in the state, which was the main question on the ballot. You apparently, it was bundled into it with the wording that it was pegged on liquor stores, it was going to be regulated as a liquor store, and so that when you voted for that, you were also accepting that you were open to having dispensaries in your town. So I understand that. I think it's a little bit, there was a little bit of misunderstanding. I would say that, I can say for myself and for people that I spoke to, I voted basically for legalization. I didn't want to go back to the dark ages where it was going to be decriminalized. I didn't really understand that when I made that, and in fact, apparently, it actually kind of tied me into the fact that I was accepting dispensaries actually right in the district that I was voting for. I don't know if that's correct. But anyway, many people, I believe, voted for it just because they were voting for legalization, just the same way that you would vote, say, for gambling in the state, but you never really expected to get a casino in your town, right? And certainly in Brookline, we were not going to get a casino. We voted for the gambling, but we weren't going to get a casino. I'm hearing from people, we're doing some canvassing. The group is called Concerned Citizens of Coolidge Corner. We've begun to do some canvassing. We're getting some information, feedback from people that I would hope that you'd be interested, at least to learn that maybe the support isn't as good as, or as strong as you think it is, because obviously we're a representative government. You want to be putting in establishments that there is, you know, broad support for. So we're going to be doing some canvassing. We're going to be talking to our town meeting members. We're going to be asking them to check in with their constituents just to see what the support is. But I can just tell that our initial findings from speaking to people on the street, there are many people that do not support the sanctuary, regardless of what the referendum said. They do not understand the connection there, that you were tied into getting open to a dispensary because you signed that. So I think the 60-40 is a little bit, you know, it's not quite as strong as you state it to be as a justification for it. So I want to put that out there. I would hope that you would be open to, we're going to come back in the next couple of weeks with some more information, at least about the Coolidge Corner area, as to what the support is. Like I say, I mean, I don't think if you put it, if we do find that we don't have the support that you think there is, it's never a good idea. It's not a good starting point to put something in that the community itself doesn't want. It just doesn't really work out in the long run. So I would hope that you would at least be open to taking some of the data that we get from the town meeting members that are checking with their constituents, just to give you an idea that maybe the 60-40 is really not where it is. I personally expected that we were going to get a direct referendum question. You know, there was the question, the petition, the referendum about legalization, but we also were hoping to get just a referendum asking us directly, do you want recreational dispensaries in your town? That's kind of a different question than just asking about legalization. So my second point is also that there are people that we spoke to that know nothing. We're talking about, we're a month and a half away from this opening, I think. I don't know what the timeline is, but somewhere around there, maybe November or something. I know there's a few steps to go through, but we're coming into people that have no idea, A, that it's going to come here, where the location is. I have a woman here that just showed up here, if you could raise your hand. You know, an active citizen, keeps on top of things, reads the tab, still didn't know. So my question is, like, how much outreach really was there? And I do have a specific request because there is apparently Sanctuary needed to have a community outreach meeting. It did take place on October 4th of 2018. This is just for a starting point for us, but I'm wondering, I think what I read is that they needed to make a report back to you as to what went on with that meeting, how many attendees, what was the discussion, and sort of what were the feedback. So if you have that, we would like to get that. Sanctuary has actually said that that information is private, but for us, it's a kind of a starting point to see how much outreach was done. And I bring this up because I live in Coolidge Corner. There's the Waldo Durgan development, you know, several organizations, I believe Chestnut Hill Realty and some other groups that want to be tenants there, did some fairly extensive outreach that, you know, to the point where everybody knew that was coming in. I don't feel like that due diligence took place with the Sanctuary. I never knew about it. I mean, I'm also an active citizen. So I would like to just see what kind of outreach was made so that people knew where it was. That's a year ago. You know, people don't really get onto the topic a lot of times until it gets very close to the opening. So, you know, I'm just trying to report back sort of some of the on-the-ground stuff about the support and how much people were informed of what was going on. So if you could, again, I'm going to repeat, I'm hoping that you might be open to some of the information that we're going to be getting in the next couple of weeks with the canvassing. And also if you could get back to us with, if that's possible, if that's not private, if it's open information, if you could tell us how many people attended that meeting. I believe it was at the Holiday Inn. It was on October 4th. And just what the results were, what the feedback was. And we will be coming back in the next couple of weeks to try and give you some more information, and I hope that you'll be open to listening to it. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Mara Mayer.
Hi, my name is Maura Marr, and I'm a long-time Brookline resident.
Oh, I apologize for messing up your name.
That's okay, nobody gets it right, that's all right. I live in the Coolidge Corner area, and I feel totally blindsided. The only reason I'm here tonight is because I saw a flyer on the post outside the post office. I had no idea that this was coming into Brookline, into the, you know, former Pier 1 space. So that's why I'm here tonight. I, you know, won't take up much time because it's pretty much what, you know, two people before me have said. But I think that's what I find so disturbing is that I had no idea this was happening. As I say, I feel blindsided. I feel like this sounds like it's a done deal, and I don't know if there's anything that can be done at this point. So I just think public awareness. And I keep abreast of what's going on in the town. I read my, you know, tab and all that and go online. And I just, you know, really feel blindsided that this is coming in, and I have very strong feelings about it not happening in Coolidge Corner, so close to schools and the families and all that.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah. So, question of approving the minutes of September 3rd, 2019. Any corrections by members of the board? Seeing none. So, all in favor of approving the... Well, public comment's over, but I'll give you no more than a minute or two.
Hi, my name is Irena Katz. I've lived in Brookline at Washington Street for over 30 years.
Can you use the mic, please? Just pull it down.
I lived in Brookline for over 40 years, same place, Washington Street. I'm very opposed to it. I voted against it. I did not think that the victory of the legalization would bring the stores to us. I have been very involved in squashing St. Mary's development. I am following everything that I've been following. I had no idea we're so close in at Coolidge Corner. I do not understand how it can be allowed so close to school. I'm a mother, I'm a college teacher, Boston University. I do not understand how the businesses like Mathnasium and Eureka can possibly operate. I was also chilled when I contacted, I don't remember the names, but our representatives with the St. Mary development. And I received basically answers that, okay, we voted. I was chilled when I later found that Neil Wyshynski was coming to the ribbon cutting opening at one of the dispensaries. I'm sorry, I have a question in my mind. Does anybody benefit from this? Why is it done under the cover of the night? Why the neighbors know very little, even those who, like me, are concerned and want to monitor it? I think it is a very sad and troubling situation. It is not democracy. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, move approval of the minutes of September 3rd, 2019. Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Ms. Fernandez?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Okay. 7C for the board. Okay. Yeah, okay. Question of approving a contract with West Construction Corporation, Halifax, Massachusetts, in the amount of $340,000 for installation upgrades at the Coolidge Corner School. And why don't you talk about both this and the next one, question of approving a contract with Enterprise and Equipment Co., Weymouth, Massachusetts, in the amount of $107,800 for HVAC upgrades at the Coolidge Corner School.
Good evening, Tony Quigley with the Building Department. Yes, it is appropriate to talk about them both because they're related. As you know, the town had the use of the school for the last school year, the full use of the building. Unfortunately, last winter we noticed that certain areas of the building, classrooms, were cold in the winter, and there was just really no way to get them warm enough. So this was the architect's way to address those issues. It's primarily the classrooms over the parking garage and also in the pre-K area. So the idea is to add additional insulation to the garage below the classrooms, and also provide supplemental heat in the pre-K areas and some supplemental heat in the plenum in the loading dock area. So that's the reason for the work, and the hope is, if approved tonight, this would get done prior to winter.
That wasn't thought of when the contract began? I mean, the fact that you need insulation under an open space.
Well, it does
below
have
classrooms.
insulation. This is added insulation. There's a lot of insulation below that garage, lots of it. But the classes are simply still too cold, so this is to add more insulation. And you know, it's not a situation we want to be in, but we're not getting additional design fees for this. And the fact is that all of this work is a betterment to the project. I mean, we're getting added insulation, added HVAC components. So it's all, you know, again, not where we want to be, but it's a betterment to the project and all in the idea of addressing these issues.
Got it. It's Fernandez.
Are either of these the same companies that we contracted before to do this work?
No, the contractor, the general contractor that did the school is Shawmut Design and Construction, and their work is, you know, mostly done, and there's still issues out there that they're working on, and they were actually approached to provide this work on a change order potentially, and this is the result of the second round of bidding. So in an effort to get the best prices on these, we bid it twice. We also asked the general contractor, Shawmut, to provide change order pricing, and this is where we wound up. In fact, both of these, the estimates for the work is quite a bit lower than both of these, but the market's pretty difficult right now, and they're small projects, and there's also, because of the state money involved, there's a lot of regulations and stuff that potentially
Just so
have
I and other members of the public can understand, so we asked them to do the work and to provide insulation, but the insulation wasn't,
inadequate.
it wasn't sufficient enough.
Right. They built what
But
was
it's not their
drawn.
responsibility to make it sufficient?
No, the general contractor built exactly what was designed.
Got it. So they just execute on what was designed
That's right.
beforehand? Okay.
Any other questions? Okay.
Well, I do have one other question. So this money comes out of the budget for the project, is that correct?
It does.
Okay, so, and we're still using the money that we have left from the project to fix the problems that are cropping up?
Yes, there's been I do not contemplate any, you know, the town voted a certain amount of money for the project. I don't anticipate coming anywhere near that, really. So-
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Why don't you go on to the next one?
So that's,
HVAC upgrades.
right, so that's the sort of the explanation is the same. One of the reasons why they're two separate contracts is because we bid them together at the first round. The price was, for both of these, another $150,000 above it. So this was part of the strategy to try and get the best pricing, separate the work, and also to simplify the design. So in this case, there was 4 bidders, and Enterprise Equipment was the lowest bidder on the HVAC part of the work, which is to add, again, additional supplemental heat to the pre-K area and provide some added heat to the plenum above the loading dock area.
Okay, any questions? Okay, I move approval of the contract with West Construction Corp. in the amount of $340,000 for installation upgrades at Coolidge Corner School. Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Ms. Fernandez?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. I also move approval of the contract with Enterprise Equipment Company, Weymouth, in the amount of $107,800 for HVAC upgrades at the Coolidge Corner School. Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Blake.
you very much. Good night.
Okay, we have 4 temporary wine and malt beverage license. I'd like to vote them in omnibus fashion. I don't believe there are any missing approvals.
I think there is one missing approval, and somebody can correct me if I'm mistaken. I didn't see a report from the police department on item 7H, which is the temporary license to Penny Packers Fine Food for an event on September 21st.
I'm hearing that it was approved.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
So the police department has signed off on all the
great.
applications.
Any questions? Other questions? Okay, I move approval of temporary wine and malt beverages licenses to Pine Manor College for a wedding on October 27. First Parish of Brookline for a wedding on October 19. W2K LLC for a gallery event on September 20th. And Pennypacker Fine Foods for a wedding on September 21st, 2019. All in favor of those 4 temporary licenses, Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Mrs. Heller?
Aye.
Mrs. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Okay. Okay, next, question of authorizing the filing of the following vacant position within Health and Human Services. Substance Abuse Prevention Counselor. Mr. Maloney?
Patrick Maloney, Assistant Director of Public Health. This is a very important position we'd like to fill as soon as possible. It relates to our school and town partnership relating to substance abuse issues, and unfortunately this is a growth industry in the nation, and the sooner we get the position filled, we will be doing the good work that we do with the schools to counsel, educate, and initiate programs in substance abuse.
Any questions?
Just as we're into the fall semester right now, who is managing this work currently? Is this being taken on by others within the department?
Just recently vacated, so Mary Minot, the administrator, is filling in the gaps, but you know, as with any vacancy, it's a struggle, but
Right.
she's trying the best she can.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So I'm sorry.
I was just going to ask for maybe a little bit more detail about the specifics of the type of substance abuse work that this position does. You know, you were here for the beginning part of the hearing where we heard about marijuana, and we've heard about e-cigarettes and edibles and
Sure.
tobacco. So just what are some of the more specific types of substance abuse work that this position handles?
Well, as you touched on, these are emerging subject matters that our parents are very interested in learning about. So this position assists with working with the parent associations, and the previous person organized a number of seminars and workshops, and I have to say some of the most well-attended parent events relating to how to talk with your children related to marijuana and vaping and other issues. They have a workshop coming up related to vaping, because this is a challenge. And as our Commissioner of Health just did a recent op-ed piece on that. So where that position is in tune to what the challenges are, and working with the parents, educating the parents, working within the school system. So workshops, counseling, the peer groups that this person puts together, working with the peers that they help educate the middle school children. They go out and do outreach, and hopefully influence them on making good decisions. And that's what it really comes down to. There's so many things now that students are being exposed to, and it's making good, sound decisions, and that's our challenge. And as Administrator Klickner knows, this is what the Health Department's been really pushing for, that the monies that will be coming in, we really feel we're going to have to step it up. And it's clear from the comments I heard tonight. We are going to have to step it up. And you expect that from your Public Health Department.
I guess specifically, there's been a lot of concern expressed about underage students with medical prescriptions for marijuana, selling or giving their prescriptions to other underage students. Do you have any ideas as to how to address that? I know that's a problem with with Ritalin and similar drugs, throughout the country, high school through college. But do you have any thoughts on how that issue can be addressed?
Well, we have routine meetings with the school department nurses and their health committee, and I think this is something that's been on the agenda and strategies on how best to deal with that. But I would suggest if the select board would want to delve into that, perhaps, or the town administrator, having them get together and present on this topic and some of the strategies they've been approaching. But yes, that is a challenge. And it's not just to Brookline, it's across the nation.
Any other questions?
Just if you can talk about the kind of person you're looking for. It looks like someone with an MSW, substance abuse certification.
Exactly. The MSW is the social component for the position. You're counseling, you're doing social work, you're establishing relationships with the students. Then the substance abuse training and certification is something that we ensure that somebody is on top of the latest issues. We want somebody who's also has a vision and a focus on dealing with adolescents. So this is a specialized person we're looking for, and we've been very fortunate. The persons that we've had in the past have always been a great fit, and that's to Mary Minot, the administrator for that, as well as we assist her with vetting those individuals.
Thank you.
And you're looking for applicants in all the local social work schools, I assume?
Correct.
And are you going beyond just Boston area?
That's correct. Yes. Urban environment training is a plus. So yes, absolutely, we'll be looking for that. We're fortunate where we have some of the top social work schools that all of those curriculums are integrating this type of training into ones for students that want to specialize in adolescent substance abuse issues. So it's a growing curriculum, and we get to take advantage of it from all the great institutions we have here.
So I know BC and BU, and there are other schools that have social work programs, which are great programs. I just urge you to go beyond just the local area, because those schools don't have the diversity that maybe we want to include in the process. And going to schools maybe outside the area, historically black colleges, for example, that may have social work schools, would be a way to ensure that the pool of applicants that you're looking at is diverse. Not taking anything away from BC and BU and
Sure.
the others.
No, that's valid, and yes, and this is a great place for somebody to relocate to. So absolutely, that I'll remind Mary to pursue that.
So, any other questions? Move approval of the authorization for the filling of the vacant position with Health and Human Services for a substance abuse prevention counselor. Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
And chair votes aye.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, next, Boston Athletic Association Half Marathon, and Stuart Wall will request special use permit for the running of the half marathon. So
That's correct. Good
you have
evening.
the floor.
My name is Stuart Wall, Operations Manager at the BAA. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the 19th Annual BAA Half Marathon. The BAA seeks to work within the same footprint as we have in past years. The 13.1-mile loop course starts and finishes in Boston Franklin Park, and it runs along the Emerald Necklace Park system. As in the past, the race has a field size of 9,000 registrants and starts at 8 a.m. There's a 3-hour time limit, and the last runner is expected to finish at 11:15. Runners enter the Brookline section of the course at Pond Avenue from the Jamaica Way, following past Leverett Pond and exiting back into Boston at Chestnut Street. This has an expected impact from 8:30 to 10:30 in the morning for about 3/4 mile of roadway. An athlete nutrition zone and hydration station are situated at Pond Avenue and Allerton Street, around the midpoint of the 13.1-mile course. And BAA appreciates the support from the Brookline Police Department and Public Works, and will continue to communicate and coordinate with both partners leading up to the event. So on behalf of the BAA, I respectfully request that a special use permit be granted in order to conduct a safe and successful event through the town of Brookline on October 13, 2019. The authorization should include the right to utilize the course roadway and adjacent sidewalks and other appropriate areas as determined in our planning sessions to conduct the race in a safe and controlled manner, including necessary signage, timing mats, portable toilets, and medical hydration and nutrition stations. As always, the BAA appreciates the support of the town of Brookline and looks forward to working together in the weeks ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? Mr. Kleckner, have there been any issues? I know we've been doing this for years, so we should know how to do it without any problems. Have there been any questions or problems that we need to?
No. I mean, this is a much different event than the regular marathon that bisects the town. So this is in a section of the town, and I think we've got it down pretty good at this point. So.
Good. Okay.
I've participated in this particular race, and it was very difficult not to run home when I got to Longwood Ave. But it was well executed.
In years past, I've had the pleasure of representing this board at the event, and it is a thoughtfully conducted race, and I think I'm not aware of any issues in the past. And I will note that there are more than a few Brookline residents that run this race, so it's a popular event in town for spectators and athletes alike.
And I'll just say that half marathons are great races because you don't kill yourself training and running the marathon. Half marathons are hard, but they're fun and they're doable for anyone who's in fairly decent shape. So I urge anyone who is in that condition of fairly decent shape and willing to try something that's really going to be very beneficial to them to consider it.
Also put in a plug for the 5K, which happens in the spring, which I have ran, and that's about it.
Okay. So I move approval of the, let's see, what are we approving? This is the request of special use permit. Okay. Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
And Chair votes aye.
Well, thank you, Board, for your comments and your support.
Thank you. Okay. How late are we right now? Okay, heads up. We're running a little late. We just have a few more things on the agenda. We shouldn't take up a lot of time, but we have a hearing scheduled for 7 p.m. and it's now 7:35. So we apologize, but we'll get there as soon as possible. So boards and commissions interviews. Following candidates for appointment, reappointment to boards and commissions will appear for interviews. Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations Commissions, Mariah Nobriega and Eloise Lawrence. Are they here? Okay.
Mariah just stepped out. She can be back if you need.
Okay.
I think she's downstairs.
And Eloise, I see.
Right, I see. So come on up, Eloise. So tell us why you want to be on the Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations Commission.
Thank you.
And,
My name
and
is...
who put the idea in your head?
Who do we have to thank?
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure I should use his name. My name is Eloise Lawrence. I am a lifelong Brookline resident. I had the privilege and still have the privilege of living on Allendale Farm. My family has been here for a long time. My wife and I lived here with our 2 children. But as much as we get to live in a rural place in the city of, in the town of Brookline, my passion has always been regarding civil rights and diversity and inclusion. I'm a lawyer and I'm a teacher at Harvard Law School, and I focus on housing issues, and particularly I represent low-income people, primarily people of color who are getting evicted from their homes in the current displacement crisis that we're having all across the Boston region, and the affordability crisis that we're having. I believe that I spent most of my time working in the city of Boston, and I've been thinking, why am I not working at home and doing what I can to ensure that Brookline remains a diverse, inclusive place that is a place that we all want to continue to live, and that is not just for the uber rich or just for one class of people, but for all of us to live in. And it's what makes this town great and what has made this town great. We can do more. I fundamentally believe we can do more, not only to build more affordable housing, to ensure that we focus on integrating our schools and on integrating where we live. Housing is my passion because I do believe it starts with who your neighbors are. And I know that's kind of funny from where I'm living. But I do fundamentally believe it, and I haven't always lived there. But I do believe that we will, if we don't continue to work further, to affirmatively further, in the words of the Federal Fair Housing Act, you go backwards. And the fact is that there are people who have Section 8 vouchers. People say, well, you just need more vouchers. You just need more subsidies. That isn't sufficient. People are not even able, those people who get golden tickets are not able to even use them in the town of Brookline because it's so unaffordable these days. So that's my passion, that's what I care about, and I'd like to bring that to the commission.
Okay, any questions?
I just want to ask, I mean, if you can talk a little bit more about that, about the Section 8 piece. This is something of great interest to me. And what sort of changes do you think we could make as a town that would make increased voucher utilization here in Brookline for folks with Section 8 vouchers?
Well, contradicting what I just said, I do think there is a way in which you need to use money, more money, but smarter. And I know Cambridge has been a real leader. Cambridge is in a similar affordable housing crunch. There's ways in which you need to layer subsidies on top of each other. You can't just send people out into the market anymore and say, here's a Section 8 voucher, go and find an apartment. There's no way someone with a Section 8 voucher can compete anymore. The rental payments are just not high enough. And furthermore, when a landlord, and my family does own land and serves as in that capacity, you're not, even if you say, well, you can't discriminate, the rents just make it prohibitive to begin with. And the reality is that in a quick turning, competitive world, the landlord is going to choose the person without the subsidy, that they don't have to do the inspection, that they have to, that's just the real world. So you have to be really proactive about perhaps building more subsidized housing, putting more layers into existing buildings so that people can use their Section 8 in those buildings. But also you have to be proactive about going after the landlords that are explicit. And you can't, I mean, people, there are people who literally put it in their public ads still, saying, not necessarily in Brookline, but there are people who say no Section 8, no kids, So there's much low-hanging fruit. Some of these problems are really difficult, and obviously undoing 75 years of segregation is not going to be done overnight, but there are many ways in which we can work on it. But we can't just say we can't just allow the market to solve the problem. That isn't realistic.
So I know we're behind schedule, so I'll ask you a big question, and hopefully you can give me an answer in 90 seconds or 2 minutes. Bill McGonigal from the City of Boston came up with an interesting idea to tweak the amount of money that followed these Section 8 vouchers, as I understand it. That's not something that we've talked about here in Brookline, but much like the City of Boston and Cambridge and the Metro Boston region writ large, this is a high-cost place to live, and that fixed Section 8 voucher amount doesn't go as far as it might in other parts of the country. So what's your thought about that as an idea here in Brookline, or just in concept in Metro Boston?
So Bill McGonigal is very smart, and I think runs the Boston Housing Authority incredibly well. I think that, but it wasn't his idea. It was a federal idea of the small area FMR, which means small area fair market rents. So that now Boston does. You go through every neighborhood. you know, from Hyde Park on up, and they have a different rate, as you say, now based on much more refined criteria like zip code, rather than saying all of Boston, which is, we know Beacon Hill is completely different than Hyde Park. So the idea of the small area FMR, I think, is a very good one. It can mean that, you know, it's a question of resources, but it can mean that you serve fewer people. So if your pie is the same amount and you're going to pay more for for one particular, it may mean you have less vouchers to go around or less money to go around. But if you're a town like Brookline, where you're really trying to keep people in here rather than just sort of, that maybe make a lot of sense for you, because there's a ways in which the priority may be to keep people, fewer people here, but at least some, rather than saying everyone takes their voucher, they pour it out to Quincy or to Lynn. So, yeah. I don't know. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Just quickly point out that the Brookline Housing Authority is currently applying for this SAMFR designation. So we're submitting our application for that. The other piece I wanted to say, too, as we think about sort of, you talked about addressing this long history of segregation, is that currently of our Section 8 voucher holders, 72% of them are actually identified as white. And so what does it mean to actually, as we increase voucher utilization, to also address the issues that you're talking about in terms of racial segregation?
I
know we don't have a lot of time.
Okay. Without, if there was a question in there, without guessing, but perhaps there's a reason that Brookline has an incredibly high number of white people who are still in the city versus those people of color. When you look over the region, more people of color have those vouchers and are going elsewhere. So that's something to think about.
Final question, unless someone else has a question. In your presentation in response to questions, you seem to suggest that the issue of what the Fair Housing Act requires, you know, intentional desegregation of communities, only refers to the lower end of the income spectrum. I mean, do you have some thoughts in terms of how we can integrate across the income spectrum? Because I can't see how a community that has a lot of very, very rich people and a small number of people in affordable housing is sustainable. Ideas on how Brookline could fill that middle gap, that middle income segment. That's what I think you're going to have to start thinking about on the Diversity Commission.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, in addition to everything else.
No, I agree that that it is true, and one shouldn't make the assumption that that, for example, that one level of the income scale is synonymous, for example, with certain races. Absolutely. Right. I couldn't agree more. I think that is where zoning is relevant, though, not just about vouchers and subsidies and stuff, but that's zoning is the reason that we do have the deep segregation, and that is something that the town can address. And it is the type that you do have to recognize that certain types of housing do lead to certain outcomes, especially along racial lines. So if your zoning is continues to be quite exclusionary, then it's not going to be a surprise that there isn't going to be more integration.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I see Mariah in the background. Oh, there's no break, I'm sorry.
Hello.
So tell us why you'd like to be on the Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations Committee. For the audience, because we all know you.
Yeah. So I grew up in Brookline, and I'm back, and I have a long history in Brookline, and I have become more involved in a lot of this diversity and inclusion and community relations work over the past year or two, including the filing of Warrant Article 29 last year, which last spring, which addresses some of the issues around underrepresentation of underrepresented groups in town government and the subsequent formation of the Inclusive Brookline group, which is looking at a lot of these issues as well, and how we can begin to really take talk into action for the next step. And I have multiple members of the commission are also involved in Inclusive Brookline, but I think it's good to have deeper connection and integration of the work that this larger group of citizens is doing with the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations, as well as the commission itself. And so in particular, there's a subgroup, I think I'm probably going to mess up the name, but it has to do with community outreach and so specifically as opposed to some of these other issues like housing. And I'm particularly interested in the work that that group is doing.
Any questions?
If you can just tell us, based on the meetings, and I've been to a couple of them for Inclusive Brookline, are there some ideas that you hope to bring now to the Diversity Commission to maybe move forward some of the ideas that are bubbling up in Inclusive Brookline?
Yeah, so I think that some of the key ideas are how can we do perhaps a more formal, sanctioned process. Some of the ideas that Inclusive Brookline is bringing up, for example, doing formal outreach to the community, how can we have some of these activities be less just a group of citizens and also having the structure and engagement of the town itself to really formalize some of these informal activities. And so I think having that connection, it's already there again informally, but the more that we can particularly have that. I think also that if the Inclusive Brookline group can surface some problems or areas that we might want to delve more into, having the commission really study them and come up with formal recommendations will help drive that conversation forward in a more productive way.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
We're not going to make appointments tonight, but at a future meeting, we will make appointments.
Okay,
And
sounds good.
we'll let
Thank you.
know. Okay, thanks. Okay, next, Indigenous Peoples' Day. So, no one's going to speak on that.
No, you are.
I am, okay. So I noticed that the warrant article that called for an Indigenous Peoples' Day requires the select board to actually establish it. So we're going to establish that tonight. So the question that we're voting on is the establishment of the second Monday of October as Indigenous Peoples' Day in Brookline, as outlined in Article 20 of the Fall 2017 Town Meeting Resolution. The question has come up by a local state representative regarding whether that means that we can't celebrate Columbus Day, and the answer is Indigenous Peoples' Day is not exclusive of any other thing, any other celebration. So that was just a question that came up. Any questions about this? We're just establishing the day. Just in time, because that day is coming up soon.
That's right. And I can say just briefly before we take the vote that there will be an event on that day, what we will vote in as Indigenous Peoples' Day. There's a celebration that will be taking place at the Coolidge Corner School. I was just hurriedly trying to get the information on it, but we'll make sure that we talk about that at a future select board meeting, and keep your eyes peeled for some of the kiosks where posters go up around town, maybe even those new SUFA signs. And we'll make sure we get the word out about that celebration that the entire community will be invited to.
Okay. So all in favor of establishing the second Monday of October as Indigenous Peoples' Day in Brookline? Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. So next, finally to your hearings. First is Article 8. Who's going to be handling it?
Mr. Russell, Fred Russell, who's the water and sewer
Okay.
director.
Mr. Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Article 8 for us.
Yep. For the record, Fred Russell, Water and Sewer Director for the town. If you recall back in June at the water and sewer rates presentation, we were looking at recommending expanding the senior discount to not only income-based, but also tax-deferred and work-off programs for seniors as well. this article would do that. This article would, be at town meeting, and then expand the eligibility for seniors in the town. Right now, under our current program, there's only about 7 seniors that qualify or that are eligible. This, in speaking to Gary McCabe, would probably expand that to about 50, maybe a little under 50. But again, I think it's the step in the right direction, and we've also agreed, myself and a task force, to see if there's future expansions we can do further on down the road. But I think this is a good start.
It's been the legal research of our town council that such a expanded program would require legislative authorization just because of restrictions. And we've noticed that other communities have done the same, and we're trying to model our article and petition after them.
Any questions? So this is a fairly non-controversial article, or is it?
No, but I do think it's definitely moving in the right direction. We had talked in the past about various tax articles which would be a benefit to seniors and others. So I think this is another step in that direction. I think it's a good one.
I'd say I agree. I remember when you came before us before and gave us that number, that single-digit number, and so I'm glad that we're also moving in the right direction. And if there are things that we can do to Mr. Kleckner and others to continue to move this forward, I look forward to being part of that conversation.
I can report on behalf of the Moderators Committee that's looking at senior tax issues, and I can't quite remember what the name is, and I got yelled at last night for referring to it by the wrong name, so I'll describe the subject matter, not the exact title. I took this article up for consideration last night, and we decided that taking a position would be beyond the scope of our work, but I think it's fair to say that there was general support for this concept, and in making strides towards increasing affordability of Brookline for low and moderate income seniors in particular.
So this is a public hearing. Any comments from the audience? Mr. Fry.
Ernie Fry, town meeting member, precinct 7, and a member, one of the co-petitioners of the original, a few years ago, warrant article that mandated the public opinion of the before setting the water rates. There's a couple of people. David Lescoyer is the other was the other co-petitioner with me on that warrant article, and we've been looking at this. We're surprised that this was brought as a select board warrant article, but so be it. We are not in disagreement with the intent of the final result. We certainly want to see the senior citizens get a discount, a break on the rates. However, we feel that the water commissioners, all of you, already have this authority, and we feel that it's not necessary to have a home rule petition to grant this sort of discount. And we're leery about the added time that's going to be taken before the water and sewer director is able to implement a reduced charge if this needs to go before the legislature. So we are supporting the idea and the objective of the warrant article, but we feel process is a question, and we would like to see that there be some delay in taking action on this until we are able to research this a little bit further and possibly come up with an alternative way of solving the same, getting to the same point.
Okay, without objection, I think we can put off voting on this one to a future date. But I think you are your view is in conflict with our town council's view.
It is definitely we know that it is, we are in conflict with it, and we wish some time to review review that conflict and see if we can come up with a mutually satisfactory solution.
Until you do that, we are bound by town council's opinion.
That's fine.
Okay, so we won't vote on this.
May
I'm
I
sorry.
ask a
Yes.
question? And maybe Mr. Russell knows the answer, but in section 1, it says, notwithstanding any general or special law to the contrary, the town may discount fees charged to residents age 65 and over for the use of the town's water and sewer system. So does that mean that we could implement a system of discounts before we actually get permission from the general court, if in fact we need it, which we believe we do?
That's basically the
I was
contention that
asking Mr. Russell.
David and I have, is that you already have the authority to do it.
But I'm asking Mr. Russell.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
When I spoke to town council, she said that when she spoke to the DOR, that there are towns that have done that have not waited for home rule and just done it on their own. I actually played out a scenario to her was, what if we adopt it as a town and then go through with the home rule petition after the fact? She didn't say we couldn't do that, but we could expedite it that way potentially. But I think ultimately, to make it bulletproof, it needs to go for a home rule petition, and so be it. So.
I see. Okay, thank you.
One other point, Mr. Chair. I'm not positive of this, but I'm told that there will be a proposed amendment to the language that inserts the words income eligible. So it makes clear that this is going to be a means-tested program, as it is now. So I haven't seen it officially. I'm just giving you a heads up that I'm told that the advisory, is it the advisory subcommittee will be doing that?
Yep. They actually added that at the subcommittee last night. They added the income eligible in front of residents. Correct.
Okay, thank you. So next, Article 11, Kerrigan Place. Pardon?
Ms. Gilbert's going to do that on behalf of her client, even though it is our petition.
Hi, Jennifer DePazzo Gilbert, and I am here. Peter Ditto had a conflict in his schedule and asked me if I wouldn't mind coming because I actually worked on this project when I worked for the town, so I know the history, and it's, I'll keep it short and sweet because I know you have a lot ahead of you. So many years ago, when the old red cab site was finally being developed by the third developer that came along, the town sold a small parcel, 502 square foot parcel on Kerrigan Place. And Kerrigan Place was a private way that ran literally right now where the Homewood Suites is on Route 9, it would run through the middle of the building. And there were two old water and sewer drains from the 1860s that ran through Kerrigan Place. And so part of the deal with Claremont Corporation, the developer, was, we'll sell you that land. There was a public bidding process. They went ahead and developed the Homewood Suites and built the Homewood Suites, but they were required as part of their plan to relocate the water and sewer easements that the town had in that location. And they upgraded the water and sewer piping to PVC piping. The design and the specifications were reviewed and approved by the town. And then after the project was built, we got the as-builts together. And now the town needs a new easement in the new location, which runs on the developer's property, but it now runs right next to Davis Path. And the town needs access in the future if they need to access the new water and sewer lines. And so what this warrant article would do would be to clear title and release the old 1860s easement that ran through Kerrigan Place, and then give the town a new water and sewer easement in the new line that the developer created.
Okay. Seems fairly straightforward. Any questions?
So no cost associated with this?
No, the developer paid for all the costs, provided Peter Ditto with the survey and the as-builts, and everything was approved by engineering.
So, any questions? This is a public hearing. I'm sorry, Mr. Frankel?
I was just going to ask, should we read anything into the sort of delay that the hotel's been open for a while and now we're coming back to this?
Yes, the hotel's been open for a while, and this, I guess, fell off everybody's radar for a little while. but to clear title and to make sure that the town has the easement that they need in the new line. And we wanted to make sure that this happened. So I worked with Peter to get the necessary documentation to him and assisted with drafting the warrant article.
Perfect. Great. Any questions from the audience? This is a public hearing. Seeing none. Do we want to vote this one tonight, or are there still issues we need to think about and learn about?
I'm not aware of any issues that are complicating this.
Okay.
We can always reopen if we do discover something.
Okay. So I move approval of, what are we doing?
A recommendation.
We're
Favorable.
recommending favorable action on this article.
I move favorable action on Article 11, Kerrigan Place easement. Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you. Okay, Article 12, solar PA roofs. And who is, that's actually a select board article.
I think.
Zoe's coming to
yes.
them.
Okay.
So, yeah, Lynn. Ms. Lynn.
Hi, I'm Zoe Lynn, the Town Sustainability Program Administrator, and I'm here to answer questions on the Select Board's warrant Article 12, to ask for authorization from town meeting to bring two things back, a power purchase agreement and a payment in lieu of taxes agreement for you guys to review and execute if it's in the best interest of the town.
So I have a couple questions. First of all, we're proposing putting solar panels owned by private parties on some public buildings, most
Correct.
of which I think are bond financed. Have these, is this proposal been run by town council or bond council?
Yes, to both of those.
They have no issues with private use issues
The
with that?
actual contract language is still being worked through in details, but as of right now, they do not.
Okay, so they've approved this private use of property?
Yeah.
Pending final review, but yeah.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions?
Just, I think if you could, just for the public, explain just very briefly, if you can, how this would work. I mean, I've read through everything, but if you can just explain it for folks.
Yeah, so I think the most important part is this would come back to you in more details with the power purchase agreement and contract, with actual contract language, but in general, so the warrant article is asking the town meeting to give you permission as a select board to enter in a 20-year power purchase agreement for solars on roughly 6 sites in the town. If the select board executed that contract, then we would have a private developer put these panels on these sites. They would own and maintain the panels. They would do this in close consultation with the public buildings director and the building department. And the electricity would, we would be able to use the electricity, and the renewable energy certificates would go to the local utility, helping the state up its renewable portfolio standard. I'm sure there's more I can say, but yeah, please ask
And there's
questions.
an option if we decided later on that we would like to purchase these, there's an option for us to do so, but there's no commitment for us to do that.
Yeah, that's what we're investigating while the warrant article moves forward, and that is, as of right now, our understanding and hope, yeah.
So there are 6 sites articulated in the warrant article.
Correct.
Why these 6 sites? What's special about them?
So this happened before my arrival. My understanding is feasibility, roof readiness, because we can't put up panels on roofs that either can't hold them or aren't ready or are going to be updated real soon. Also trees, shading, cover. These, I also believe, went in front of the school committee, and we were given permission, I believe. This is with an asterisk, I believe, but and that all happened before I arrived. But
So it's fair to say that this is the outgrowth of previous work
Yes.
and builds on it, so.
sorry, I didn't hear that.
Outgrowth of previous work, that we did a study, we looked at roofs across town, and this is what we think is most viable, at least as a first pass.
At first pass, yes, correct, exactly.
Could I add to that? I think that this actually this question has been before us before, not exactly in this form. Early on, when I was on the board, we dealt with the question of a company called Blue Wave. And so I think that this is, and then Blue Wave, after some time and lots of promise, they kind of fell through because they lost their financing. And so it's been sort of an ongoing effort to try to find a way to get solar on the roofs. And
Yes, I have heard this before. I
Yeah.
completely agree, Nancy, that there's been intentions for a while, and this is hopefully going to end up in good results for us. Yeah.
Good. Any other questions? This is a public hearing. Are there any public comments for this warrant article, number 12? Seeing none, I think we probably want to put this off until later. Further discussion, further sort of looking into it.
I'm sorry, you want to wait? We will not have additional information the next time you hear this. We will have additional information probably after town meeting.
Okay.
Some stuff's coming in, but not significant.
We need more information before town meeting, before this board can make a vote. But I think they just want to think about it a little bit more, hear from some of the other committees that you're dealing with.
Okay.
And then they'll fashion a vote before town meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, we typically don't, except for, straightforward, simple warrant articles, don't vote favorable action or not at the first hearings.
Yes, of course, yes. Yeah, I was just clarifying that I don't know that we'll have significant additional information to add, other than what's in front of you right now until we get a little further into the contract development.
Understood. Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
So next, warrant article 4. This is the Driscoll 4 warrant article.
Hello, good evening.
Yeah, I'm sure you.
So, Mr. Namian, how long is your PowerPoint?
Very short. You should know most of this already. So hopefully you're going to
Oh, I
speed
didn't know what
through.
you have on your computer. Is that an architectural rendering of the architect?
Yeah, that's let's see if that, we might get like a tiny zoomed in portion, which is not exactly my intention here. Give me 1 second. Well, let me do the handout copy and do the small copy on the big screen. You can follow along and not take any more of your time. I think there's at least 6 there. Okay, so my name is Scott Ananian. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 10, and I'm going to give you a real quick overview of this article, trying to be careful with your time. There's more people queued up behind me to have their say. So this is Article 4, which is a almost an identical duplicate of the warrant article that was filed back in May of 2019. It's the enabling language to allow town meeting to vote an appropriation contingent on a debt exclusion ballot that you, the select board, would have to set. Okay, so our overall goal, of course, is to try to keep this project on track for the fall 22 opening, which was its original opening date. There is significant overcrowding needs in town, and this is the shovel-ready project that actually has a chance of doing something, anything to help with this crisis in the near term, the nearest term, I'll say. So very briefly, because you've seen this already, this was the slides from the November 2018 hearing on these warrant article, showing overcrowded spaces in Driscoll, and I have no idea if this will play, but this is a typical PTA meeting. You don't get the benefit of sound, but in the background you can hear they're practicing music in the background, so there's violin practice, the best instrument for small children to play. And there's a class coming through here, the PTO is trying to meet, and in the background is the cafeteria, and they're busy setting up lunch. So there's clanking dishes, you'll just have to imagine, clanking dishes, a full classroom of violins, and over that, the PTO trying to organize its activities. This is the new building that was designed, which is the product of a large amount of development over the past couple of years. I won't say it's a perfect building, but it is a carefully crafted compromise between all the different needs of the site. And as I presented back in May, I believe, and the folks involved in this particular campaign are hoping that this is a project to sort of reunify the town and reset us on a direction of addressing our town's needs in the schools. So the Driscoll project was approved back in December by an overwhelming vote, 220 to 2. We got 547 signatures on an open letter to the select board back in May from all over town. I'll show you that in a second. We got commitments from prominent folks involved in both the Yes and No campaign in May 2019 to help, and I'll come back to that as well. Item 67, which on the four-section Driscoll School passed by almost three-quarter majority in May. The Capital Subcommittee just has been working on this all summer, and just this past Tuesday endorsed a three-school plan, including Driscoll 4, on September 10th. And as we've always said, we're hoping that this is the first step in an ongoing plan. Our motto from the beginning has been Driscoll, Pierce, and what's next. So this is step one, hopefully. So this is the language that was voted back in May, urging the select board to prepare the debt exclusion question, to put the question on the ballot of a special town election to be held no later than the special town meeting in fall 2019. That meeting is now set for November 19th. And further resolved that at the time we were urging the select board to take good advantage of the summer and use some of the unspent funds previously appropriated for Driscoll to make whatever design changes you felt were needed to ensure the project fit well in the space and fit the needs in the town. So this is the graph of people who signed the open letter back in May. You can see that covers pretty well all of Brookline. My own pet peeve is always that graphs like this aren't weighted by population density. And so this is the same issue we always have in national elections, where you see drop-offs in the middle of the country. But this is the area directly around Driscoll School, which is that small yellow section, the dead center, and you can see there's a ring of dots. The immediate abutters, both on the street above and on Washington Street, have spoken in favor of the project. Some of them have even donated funds to the campaign. So what I'm urging the select board to do is embrace this opportunity. We have a community which is willing to, frankly, endure years of disruption to their school life and to their educational experience of their kids, and the loss of what Barbara Scott remembers as a small two-section Driscoll school, how it was originally built. We've got almost 4 sections of kids crammed into that two-section school now. We're willing to make it an actual 4-section school. We've got town members who've invested literally thousands of dollars and countless hours into organizing, committed to wearing out the shoe leather for canvassing, as a way to help the town start to address its overcrowded schools. We're committed to this campaign and the next ones. It's costly to delay. Construction cost inflation in the Boston area is horrific, honestly, in excess of 8% a year, and that works out for a project for Driscoll side to $175,000 a week it's costing us to delay. So there is a significant financial penalty to putting this off even a month. We're ready to go. We organized a campaign committee on September 11th. We've been working on it all summer. We've got a dozen people in the core organizing committee, thousands of dollars in the bank, and we're all set to have a first mailing at the printers the day after the select board sets the date, as soon as you pick a day. We've got a lot of experience. Heather Hamilton has volunteered to be chair of an override committee. Maria Nobrega, who you just talked to, is our campaign director. I've stepped up to be treasurer with mentoring from both the Yes campaign and the No campaign from 2019. Neil Gordon and Jim Doggett have graciously volunteered their time. Jesse Gray has stepped up to be our field director, and he's been getting help from Tommy Vitale in his campaign. This is the roadmap for the select board. Today is a public hearing on warrant article 4. The school committee is going to have a public hearing and a vote on warrant article 4 on September 23rd. That's next Monday. By next Friday, an agenda for October 1st would be posted. If we're going to adhere to the recommendations of town meeting in May, the select board needs to vote to set the election date on October 1st for a townwide election November 5th, which is traditional election day, although this does not have any competition on the ballot this year. And that's it for me. Other folks can tell you about the need. I've got a couple more slides if you've questions about certain details, but I can leave that for you to lead. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? None? Okay, this is a public hearing. Questions, comments from the audience? Ms. McClellan.
Hello again, Nicole McClellan, town meeting member, precinct 11. Scott summed it up pretty well, so I don't think I need to recap that we already have a strong majority of the school committee and a strong majority of town meeting, and actually a majority of this board that's in favor of moving ahead with Fort Driscoll as quickly as possible. But I do want to represent a constituency that I don't think we have yet properly represented, and that's the abutters of the Driscoll School. Back in May, Scott collected signatures of abutters and other supporters of Driscoll School, so I just wanted to recap that for the board to be sure they're represented. The streets that directly surround Driscoll are Salisbury, Washington, Bartlett, and Westbourne. So just for the signatories of the petition, this doesn't count people that have volunteered to help with the campaign, people that have been following up on emails and asking questions, just the signatories from the petition. We have 3 from Salisbury Road, including someone who lives directly next to Driscoll School, 15 from Washington Street, just north of Beacon. There's something like 30 for all of Washington Street, but if we're talking about just directly abutting Driscoll, 6 from Bartlett, 12 from Westbourne Terrace, and several neighbors who did oppose the Driscoll project in 2014 that we've been speaking with regularly, who have agreed not to oppose this project if it moves forward as a 4-section school. So I do want to represent that so that you all know that the work that the Driscoll Building Committee did worked very well in terms of community buy-in. We still have that support, and I don't think that's something that we see necessarily in every school community in Brookline. So I'm here to represent them. We have dozens of close abutters on record with their names who support moving ahead with the 4-section Driscoll School as quickly as possible. So I would suggest to the select board or encourage you to move forward with that quickly while we still have that momentum and goodwill on our side. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Hello, my name is Kimberly Los-Calzo. I'm a Driscoll parent. I'm here to represent some of the people that couldn't make it tonight for various reasons. The first is my friend Jocelyn, who's home with a newborn, who had a little boy that attended Driscoll Beep last year, and there was a couple days where he had to scrounge around for warm clothes in the classroom because the heat wasn't working due to our HVAC. My friend Annie, whose son was supposed to attend Beep this year at Driscoll, and it's actually at a board meeting at a preschool she had to switch her son back to because she could not make the pick up and drop off work at Clark Road when it got moved. My friend Lisa, who also couldn't attend tonight, but has a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old who pick up and drop off every day, who, like me, has given up on the stroller because they will not fit down the hallway, but whose 4-year-old son often gets bumped into and knocked over frequently after school, walking down the hallways. My friend Vanessa has twins and a 1st grader. She couldn't be here tonight, but she could not vote in May because she holds a green card. She often leaves right after school because her 2-year-old's twin cannot play freely at the playground because it's too overcrowded. My friend Kathy had a conflict tonight because of the kindergarten meeting that was happening simultaneously. She is a Lawrence mom who supports this going forward. And lastly, myself, who since the failed override in May has attended most of the school committee meetings, listening, observing, and participating when I can. And they had a long list of comprehensive plans, which I fully agree we need a comprehensive plan, but almost all of them had Driscoll 4 on their plan. I attended last Tuesday's Capital Subcommittee meeting where they voted unanimously to recommend going forward Driscoll 4, Pierce 5, and then a to be determined 2/3 section school at either Newbury or Old Lincoln School as last resort. So again, I'm just representing people that could not be here today, but again, want their voices to be heard. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. I'll try to be quick. I'm Sarah Luchansky. I'm a Driscoll parent. I have a kindergartner and a 5th grader. I just want to share one brief anecdote. So my kindergartner just started, and I was asking her about her experience out on the playground, and she told me that she couldn't play on the structure actually because there were too many kids there. They all had to play on the tennis court, which surprised me. And so I think Scott represented very nicely kind of just the general overcrowding within the school, and I think we see that the solution for Driscoll, there will be something done there. And so from our point of view as parents, sort of why wait, why not go forward with the plan that has community support at the moment. And just as a community member, I would say we are fully willing to sort of put up with, the construction and whatever the hassle will be for a couple of years. And I think I know a number of neighbors who feel similarly. Thank you.
Good evening, Dave Gayshock, town meeting member from Precinct 13 and a Heath dad. I've been following this process since B-Space back in 2012. And if there's one lesson I think we all can agree on, it's when a school community in a neighborhood largely step up and say, we want to be part of the solution, we should take them up on that offer as soon as we possibly can, because we don't know when the next such opportunity is going to arise. We've got a project ready to go. We've got a campaign ready to go. It's not just the Driscoll community. There are folks like me from Heath, from Runkle, from Pierce, from Lawrence, who aren't affiliated with any school anymore, from the Yes campaign, from the No campaign back in May, all of whom who have come together behind this as the next step, but not the only step. Taking this step with Driscoll now saves the town money and gets kids out of substandard spaces faster. But that doesn't mean that we can't do more after it. Newbury is an exciting opportunity. It's one that we absolutely should pursue acquiring, and it may well be exactly the right place for the next installment of school capacity after Driscoll and Pierce. But there are a lot of hoops we have to jump through before that time. We have to actually acquire the property. We have to see what we can fit on it. We have to mediate among all the various town interests and what we can do with it between school and other public uses. And that process is going to take time. Driscoll's ready to go now. Let's strike while the iron's hot and get it done. Thanks.
Any other comments? Any questions, comments from the board? Hearing none, let's move on to.
I feel like we've had this conversation before. I think. Yeah.
Did you have a comment?
That's my comment.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
no, I feel like we've had this conversation before. I didn't say no one's got any comments. I think we've made them before.
Deja vu all over.
Right.
Okay. So moving on, warrant Article 17, open air EV.
That's me again, but without slides. Give me 1 second to grab my other set of paperwork, and I'll be right with you. Okay, hello, this is me wearing my other hat. I'm Scott Ananian, town meeting member from Precinct 10, and this is a warrant article about the electrification of transport in our town that was brought through zoning sustainability committees. I think transportation mostly, but I think non-public buildings had a brief shot at it as well. So the first off, do you have a copy of the warrant article in front of you? Can I give you more paper to hold? You're all set? Okay.
We've got copies.
So the big picture here is that the town is part of a multi-state zero-emission vehicle alliance and is committed to having 300,000 electric vehicles on the road by 2025. So that's 6 years, and that works out to about 10% of our entire fleet in Massachusetts is supposed to be electric in 6 years. We don't really have the infrastructure yet to handle that. Unlike gas cars, which are refueled at gas stations, and we have plenty of those, electric cars are mostly charged at home and at work, mostly because they take longer to charge and because it's more convenient, honestly, not to have to go to a gas station all the time. But the places that people park cars in our town aren't really set up for electric vehicles yet. This is actually even more important in the very short term when we expect that a lot of people are going to be using plug-in hybrids and other sort of low-cost entries to electric vehicles rather than sort of a big fancy Tesla with a huge battery. Plug-in hybrids have much smaller batteries, and basically they need to be charged even more frequently than these big cars, or else you're just driving a gas car. So if you've got a plug-in hybrid, in order to actually get the emissions benefit that we're looking for, you need to be able to plug it in after every short trip. When you go to work, plug it in. When you go home, plug it in. So how are we going to do that? I've got 2 warrant articles before this town meeting. We're only talking about one of them, which is the one about open air parking licenses. So as it turns out, I proposed a warrant article back in 2016 that was referred to a committee chaired by Linda Olson-Pelkey, which did marvelous work. But one of the things that they discovered was a huge amount of the people in this town do not own the place that they park their car. So something like 5,000 parking spaces in this town are used every night to park by people who don't own those spaces. They rent them, or they are in a condo or some sort of arrangement like that where they don't own those spaces. If you work out the math, 10% of those is 500 of these open-air parking spaces that should have some capacity to charge an electric vehicle in the next 6 years, which is a big target. Warrant article, I've forgotten the number now, 21, Zoe? 31. It proposes for our town that we set an even more ambitious goal, which is 30% by 2030. So how do we get there? So we don't have a lot of good options, unfortunately, because the open-air parking license process in our town currently is a bit dysfunctional. It's very burdensome to obtain one. I think I was here 2 weeks ago. I think you had an applicant come here for an open-air parking license. The sort of scofflaw rate is extremely high. So very few of those 5,000 spaces actually own an appropriate open-air parking license, and we don't really enforce that. So our ability to sort of add conditions to open-air parking licenses to encourage provision of facilities for EVs is very low. So we have to, instead of taking the stick, we have to use a carrot. So what this warrant article proposes is a very modest carrot to sort of get the ball rolling and see what we can do in this area. So it proposes that there's a committee study, some sort of incentive or rebate program for people who own an open-air parking license and install an EV charger for their rentees, the people who are renting the space from them, as a sort of modest-scale program initially, to see if this will work and if it will be effective. It also has a couple other things rolled into it to try to, that the committee study how to make the license process work better, because this incentive is not going to be very effective if people feel that it's just too burdensome to get the license. It's not worth it. And perhaps to look at enforcement as well, which has to happen after we make it easier for people to use the, to obtain the license and worthwhile for them to do it. There's a second clause there asking that the town look at the overnight resident parking lots, which is another town-owned asset that we could look at providing EV charging for. That's, again, it's these garage orphans, the people who don't own the place they park their car. Some of them park in these town-owned spaces overnight, and we'd like to sort of, as a goal, get 10 or 30% of them EV ready by 2030, 10% by 2025, 30 by 2030. So that's the resolution, and I'm basically all I have. I'd love to entertain questions from the select board if you have any.
Any questions? Mr. Fernandez.
Sure. So this warrant article attempts to do a lot. It's attempting to establish a committee, but it's also pushing for us to put some town funds forward as an incentive for private parking lot owners to install EV chargers. It proposes to reform the licensing process, and then further proposes to get the town on board with incorporating more of these sort of overnight chargers in the town-owned parking lots. So a few questions. I'll keep them brief, and brief answers are fine too, by the way. One is, for folks that are watching, we recently inked a deal to have more chargers, I think you were here for that one, to have more chargers installed in our town-owned spots. Why not have the town focus its efforts there? And I'm just trying to figure out why we would put town funds forward to incentivize people who own lots and are charging upwards of $250 a spot for those, to incentivize them to meet what will be market demand, which is going to be more people wanting to live in town with electric vehicles.
So let me, I might take these out of order and correct me if I miss some. So one question, yes, it does. It seems like it front loads the committee and funds. The idea there is to try to get at least the budgetary part. I'm not looking for, well, I'm leaving it to the committee to find an appropriate amount, but I'm not expecting this to be a large allocation initially. But the goal is to try to get into this year's budget cycle. So, that's sort of quick work by the committee to sort of set a number on that, get it through budget, but then the longer term process would be to look at the process overall. Generally, Zoe can probably answer some more questions about that, because we've talked to the select board's office in related to licensing. There's a sort of licensing season, and then an appropriate time in the spring to actually look at the licensing process. So I'm not actually, this is a number of different things that would happen at different times spread throughout the year. And in regard to incentive versus something else, yeah, I admit it's somewhat of a rock and a hard place here. If the town enforcement of the open air parking lot system was more robust, then you could make it a condition of license rather than an incentive. But we don't have that leverage currently as a town, and so we don't have very many options other than to provide an incentive-based system. As far as I can tell, this is my attempt after thinking about this for 3 years. This is the first step that I can see. It may be that we try an incentive program and it doesn't work, but I think we need to try something, because there are 500 spaces and the clock is somewhat ticking. So how are we going to get there?
5,000 you said, right?
Well, 5,000 spaces, the 10% goal for 2025, yeah. The nice thing is that we have a metric, right? We have a goal and a metric that we're shooting for. And I will, gladly, and that is also, fair to say, one of the reasons why I wrote this as a committee rather than directing at a specific things. I think that there is still wisdom and some experimentation to be had here, and so imagine vigorous debate in the committee about the exact right parameters on this.
So you're setting up, I'm sorry, Mr. Franco, did you have a question?
I did, but why don't you?
Okay. You're talking about setting up a committee to figure out how to fund a pilot program. So that's not something in this budget cycle, which I thought I heard you say.
So the committee's main job is to provide input onto the process and the structure of the incentive. The thing that would probably go into the near-term budget is the number. So if we allocate, say, $10,000, sheesh, to this.
That's what I say.
Yeah, that's a sort of modest program, and then, my straw man is, the first 20 applicants get $500 towards the cost of an EV charger that they install, right?
So you're saying this can get into the current budget cycle? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, I believe so. We've had some preliminary discussions about that. I mean, it would require quick action, clearly, but it's not outside the realm of possibility. If I could answer Selectman Fernandez's question about the relationship with the town Beacon Street chargers. So to some degree, it's a different class of use. The Beacon Street chargers are sort of chargers that we've installed in commercial areas to support the commercial district, and they include like fast chargers, which are appropriate if I'm going to name your favorite restaurant in Coolidge Corner, and I've got an hour, half an hour, however long I'm going to spend there, and I kind of want a meaningful amount of charge. The sort of garage orphan problem is somewhat different, which is lower speed chargers and hopefully less expensive chargers for overnight. So if I've got 8 hours to spend, I sort of have a different sort of charging infrastructure there and a different need. The spaces that we installed on Beacon Street still do not allow overnight parking, and some of them are sort of privately owned as well. So they don't directly answer this question. The problem that I'm trying to solve is people who would like to transition to an electric vehicle but feel like they don't have certainty about where they're going to get charged, right? Especially if you've got a low range electric vehicle, you sort of need to know that it's not going to strand you somewhere.
I've got a housekeeping question, and then I'll finish with a comment.
Sure.
So I see in our binder that the Advisory Committee Public Safety Subcommittee did some wordsmithing.
Yes.
I'm wondering how you feel about that wordsmithing and what draft this board should really be focused on.
I have no problems with the Public Safety Subcommittee's draft. I think that's probably what I would encourage you to use.
Okay. And then my comment is, I know we've had a robust conversation about this committee and the appropriateness, the advisability of it, taking a look at the licensing process for open-air parking lots. No dispute that efficiency could be improved. I think I would take issue with the characterization that it's burdensome. Where burden does exist, there's a legitimate public policy purpose, and that's to give a public vetting and be transparent about what's going on and who might be running a lot next door to your house or the next street over. So,
granted, but take my own example, right? Because I've gone through this process myself. There's a requirement that you notify via registered mail everyone within a certain radius. In my radius, in that radius from my house, there is a large apartment building with 200, 300 people in it, and so I had to hand address certified mail to 500 people. Collect those receipts, wait for the receipts to come back, collect the receipts, bring them to the select board office. Some of that perhaps someone might call burdensome. I don't dispute that there is a valid public use, but for most people, that was a significant cost as well for certified mail. For most people, it seems currently like that is so burdensome that they choose just not to get a license rather than to go through it. So in that case, you're not getting the benefit of any oversight. So it seems like there needs to be a balance here in order to allow the board to fulfill their oversight role effectively.
yeah, I mean, we could go back and forth all night, and I won't exhaust the clock. I'll just say that at the beginning of this meeting, we heard public comment about the licensed marijuana dispensary in Coolidge Corner Sanctuary. And one of the comments that we heard tonight and we've heard in the past is, I didn't know this was happening. Nobody told me. I read the tab, I follow what's going on, and I just didn't know. And whether that's a fair response or whether that's a response that I can sort of understand or not is one thing. But by decreasing efficiency, decreasing burden, flipped increasing efficiency, as you're proposing to do here, you almost trip into that that argument being made. And it's just something that's certainly on my mind tonight, given where we started the meeting, and on my mind almost every day, given the conversation that I'm engaged in day in and day out.
And I completely agree with you, again, which is why I recommended a committee rather than just stating how I think the problem should be solved, because I think there is a delicate balance there, and maybe it's something that takes some experimentation, perhaps. But the system currently doesn't seem to be working effectively, and so it's worth figuring out how to fix it.
Have you done any outreach to current open air license holders?
Yeah, informally. So, for example, I talked to the license holder that you had 2 weeks ago on her way out and got her opinions of the process. And that's probably a good point to Ben Franco's point. It seemed like the public hearing portion of that was useful in terms of addressing some issues that those abutters had. But she was certainly not clear, very baffled by the entire process, right? There's things that we could still do to facilitate, even if you kept the letter of the requirements the same. And Linda Olson-Pelkey, this came up many times in the committee that she chaired, and she has experience from the other side as a renter of a parking space. I think there's room for more outreach, clearly, but again, one of the issues is the high scofflaw rate. I think that the best way to do outreach is probably not to start with a list of current license holders, but look at Craigslist and the list of people who are actually renting spaces right now.
So the second resolve clause says that the town endeavor to add a multiple low-speed charging outlet. Blah, blah, blah. Can't we just do that? Do we need to have a warrant article forcing us to do that, as opposed to just figuring out the cost and installing them? It seems fairly straightforward.
I view these articles as trying to help you, and that they provide political cover. There's something to point to the cities.
I think what we're talking about here is whether or not the town is going to spend fairly scarce resources to enhance private property. And, I think it would be better to go for a system where we enforce the licensing and that's hard to do, and I understand that, and we're going to have to rely on people to tell us when they're parking in what is effectively an open-air parking lot, which is unlicensed. I don't know how they would know that, but perhaps we can gather that information from cars that are registered in the town. I don't know. Honestly, I haven't given it enough thought. But I'm uneasy about the idea of providing landlords with money to enhance their properties. We don't even know, actually, if it will be used. How are we going to judge that? Who is going to collect the revenue? I'm assuming that they're not going to be providing the electricity for free if anybody signs up to use it. Who is going to be collecting that revenue? There's all kinds of analysis, I think, that needs to be made, and before I could support this. I think there are more effective ways of using our money, because it's scarce, let's face it. Lots of competing uses. So
my comment was sort of related to that, but really relates to the second resolved clause that basically tells a town to put low-speed charging in all parking lots. And maybe the more appropriate thing to do would be to work with the town and figure out what are the priorities, given the limited resources we have. I don't know what the costs are, but I can't imagine that it's small, so that this can be brought online in a organized and careful fashion, so that we don't use up resources that could be used for other related purposes.
Yeah, I deliberately didn't put a time frame on that. It's more of an aspirational statement of goals. And it's structured around the town's commitment to the other town-owned lots. And Todd led the way. I don't know if you remember back in 2016 when I originally proposed electric vehicle-related articles. One of them was about the chargers here in the town lot didn't work at the time, and I had a warrant article that says, hey, you should fix them. And in that case, town staff had them fixed before town meeting, and I happily did not move that article, and everything was fine. So, in some sense, I'd be happy, and I've had this conversation with Zoe as well, if the board wants to sort of preempt me and just go ahead and do this, I'm happy not to move it at town meeting. I think there is a benefit to public discussion such as we're having here, and there's a benefit to civic process in bringing it forward as a warrant article, I think. But
do you know what the cost of each one of these slow chargers are?
Unfortunately, it varies a lot depending on local conditions. It depends on where the closest hookup is right now, and grants available. So the town did the sort of higher speed chargers into the town lots via grant. So I don't think that costs the town anything for the first however many years that the grant covered at least. And of course the hope is that we can continue to get grants to fund the rest of this work. Right now there is a program called Make Ready where the electric utility will shoulder the cost of bringing electricity to the spot of the charger. So even if there's not a grant to cover the whole cost, that helps a lot. So it's a sort of long-term goal, I think, for the town is what I'm trying to get in the resolution.
Any other questions?
I'd just say, like, for folks going forward in the future, because there's a lot to like in here, but there's other stuff, there's other parts that I'm not sure that I do like in here, and I would encourage folks that are drafting warrant articles to maybe try not to do too much with them, because it seems like what am I voting on here? I'm just voting on a committee. Essentially it's to create a committee and then for us to maybe think about doing more in our town-owned lots, but do I want to support what Select Board Member Heller was talking about, which is sort of taking our limited funds and handing them over to private property, so there's stuff to like and stuff not to, because it attempts to do so much. It's really hard to disentangle, and I know we're not going to vote on it now, but it's a lot going on here.
Okay, this is a public hearing. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, we'll move on to leaf blowers, Articles 22 and 23. Let's start with 22.
Thank you very much.
Different. And by the way, am I correct in understanding that Article 22 ban all non-electric leaf blowers, period, and Article 23 is something else that's really talking about using leaf blowers to blow debris onto public ways?
Okay, you're partially right, and my slide presentation will explain it in greater detail. My name is Don Warner. I'm the petitioner for Article 22 and 23. Before I go through my slides, I want to tell you why I'm here tonight. My wife and I retired from our full-time jobs a couple years ago, and now we work at home. And for the last 2 summers, we've heard leaf blowing from distances as far as 500 feet from our home, inside our home. I was told that I should talk with DPW, which I did on several occasions. And then nothing happened, and then I started talking to the landscapers, and I was basically told to mind my own business. So I was really forced to put together these warrant articles. This is not something I enjoy doing. In fact, I don't enjoy speaking in public. So to get started, warrant article 22 significantly decreases the use of gasoline powered. It would still permit the town to use gasoline powered leaf blowers. Let me give some background. The article that was passed in 2016 was intended to regulate the use of leaf blowers. Prior to writing the article, a moderators committee put together a report, and in that report, they pointed out that the primary concern of Brookline residents was the excessive noise from the leaf blowers, as well as the use of leaf blowers blowing onto sidewalks and streets. In an attempt to address the noise objections, Article 8.31 placed a limit on when gas-fired leaf blowers could be used, and also on the maximum decibel level. The other thing that happened with that bylaw was the enforcement moved from the police to DPW. The intent was to really give a respite to people like my wife and I who work at home in the summertime to not hear the roar of leaf blowers, and to place a decibel limit on what those leaf blowers are permitted to do. The article intended to be very fair to landscape companies, which I can appreciate, but many of those companies, from my experience, essentially ignored the article by using gasoline-fired blowers throughout the summer. Furthermore, the town is having difficulty enforcing the seasonal limits and ensuring that the blowers that are being used do not exceed the maximum noise level. The current bylaw is not being effectively enforced. Landscapers are ignoring the regulations. Again, I'm speaking about the landscapers that I've observed and recorded. The town needs to take proactive measures to ensure compliance with seasonal restrictions. You can't just wait for someone to call up DPW and expect someone to come out, because it just doesn't happen. The town also needs to be proactive in making sure that the equipment that's being used is at the maximum level of 67 decibels. This past summer, I observed and documented 5 landscape companies using gas-powered blowers in my immediate 2-block neighborhood. I sent that information on to DPW. In fact, I gave the names and gave them all the information they'd ever want. Nothing happened. So I started taking pictures. This picture was taken May 29th across the street from my house. As you can see, there are 2 leaf blowers that are working at that time. This was taken also on the 29th, and it's my west side neighbor's property. These were taken right from my house. I didn't have to go very far to get this information. And this was taken July 31st, my east side neighbor's property. So the Article 22 is essentially going to permit the town's personnel to continue using gas-fired. I understand the cost implications, and being a taxpayer in this town, I respect that. I also don't think that where the town uses the gas-fired blowers really impacts that many residences. You know, it's in the parks and it's away from people. This article also states, with a few exceptions, all private use of gasoline-powered blowers will not be permitted, allowing only battery-powered blowers or other methods of leaf removal. Since the design and sound level of battery versus the gasoline is easy to distinguish, it really makes enforcement a lot easier. You don't have to train people in understanding decibels and understanding the type of equipment being used. Just to illustrate, I'm going to talk more about these two pieces of equipment. Gasoline-powered unit looks like that. It has a pull cord and it has a large motor connected to it. Battery-powered, same strength, lower decibel level, looks like that. Why this article? Well, first of all, there's pollution. EPA has identified it. I don't think anyone questions it. What's being questioned is the extent of the pollution. While banning gasoline-powered leaf blowers will not stop climate change, and this is not what I'm trying to do, to stop climate change. The elimination of many small sources of carbon emissions is a step in the right direction. Battery-powered leaf blowers have no exhaust emissions. On the noise, there's been multiple studies indicating that the problem with the gas-fired leaf blowers is its low pitch. This is what allows the noise to go for hundreds of feet and actually enter one's house. It's not stopped by walls, it's not stopped by windows, and it does negatively impact health and quality of life. An example of low versus high pitch. I'm sure we've all heard a car driving by and they're playing the radio very loud, and you hear the bass sound, boom, 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 and it's can't help but hear it. You hear it from a block away. On the other hand, high pitch is like the whining sound of a dentist's drill. You hear it in the operatory when the dentist is using it. You step out of the cubicle, which doesn't even have a door, and you don't hear it anymore. Electric leaf blowers don't have that low pitch sound. Further on the noise, same studies indicate that gas-powered can affect up to 15 times as many households as battery-powered blowers. And I'll give myself as an example once again. There are 12 properties within 200 feet of my house that use landscapers who use gas-powered leaf blowers. My wife and I can hear each one of them from inside our house, which is well insulated, has storm windows, which we usually kept closed. As I age, my hearing isn't that well, but I can still hear it. Battery-powered leaf blowers do not emit the same level of low-pitch noise as gasoline blowers and are not as disturbing. Effectiveness and cost. Back when the Moderators Committee produced its report in 2016, the battery-operated leaf blowers have become more powerful and less expensive. And now I'm going to do a quick comparison of the two examples that I showed you before. First, the gas-powered, I believe it's pronounced Style or Seal 500, which actually was tested by the Moderators Committee. It has a maximum power of 554 CFM, cubic feet per minute. The estimated cost to go out and buy it, and I shopped around, about $500. Average run time is till the gas tank is empty. And I don't really know how long that takes. Noise spread beyond WHO, the World Health Organization, maximum daytime sound level of 55 decibels, can be as far as 800 feet from the source. Then you go over to the battery-powered DeWalt equipment, which I read all the information on it, but I wasn't sure if it was true. I went out and bought the unit, and I tested it. And yes, it's as powerful as the gas-powered one. They're claiming 600 CFM full force. It's $500, which includes a backup battery. Average runtime with that backup battery is 100 minutes. And I tested this, my wife will attest to this. I turned it on in my backyard and I started walking down the street, pacing out, and at 150 feet, I could not hear it. Basically, that sums up Article 22. Article
By the
20.
way, how
I'm
long
sorry.
is it going to take you to do Article 23? Because you've taken up a lot of time. And we have the opponents to your articles who want to speak also, and I believe have PowerPoint. So
Great.
let's speed it up.
I will. This one's easy. There's very few slides.
Maybe you can
Basically,
skip over a couple and just tell us.
basically, it's common practice for landscapers to blow leaves and other debris from private properties onto the streets. When the debris is blown into the streets, often it's suspended by passing vehicles. The debris that leaves those private properties onto the street are airborne particles containing many unwanted toxins.
I think everyone understands, the problem there.
Okay, I'll speed it up. I just put this in to illustrate that this is what's going on our lawns now, and this is what's being blown off. I'm fine with private property owners blowing this stuff on their property. I'm not fine with it being blown and imposed on the general public. And I'll stop right there.
Any questions from the board? This is a public hearing. Any questions from the public? Yes. Yep.
Oh, no, I don't have a question.
Yeah, hold up.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, first of all,
Did you say you had a PowerPoint?
I'm not going to do a PowerPoint.
Okay.
I was out working all day and just crazy. But yeah, we're trying to do all our gardens and then our cleanups and beat the snow. And all these wonderful people from the
Michael,
landscape
can you
community.
start with
I'm
your
Faith
name?
Michaels,
Okay.
and I'm town meeting member, Precinct 5, owner of Faithful Flowers. And I really want to thank the landscape community, who, about 10 of us came out tonight, and thank them for coming because we all get up super early, and this is way past our bedtime. But I just want to say a few things about the warrant article. So Brookline now has leaf blower regulations that were developed by the Moderators Committee and voted through town meeting. I was on that committee. There were a lot of different people with different views, and we actually did a ton of research. We met for 9 months, and we developed one of the most restricted leaf blower bylaws in the country. Complaints to the police and the designated leaf blower enforcement officer are way down. I spoke to him last week. I think he said there were maybe 3 to 4 complaints per month. There's obviously something falling through the cracks with the petitioner here, and I hope that I can help him remedy that. The town is quieter now in the summer, and there's now a system to report it. Even people who were the most fervent anti-leaf blower people in this whole leaf blower world of 2 years ago have come up to me and said, it's quieter. This article restricting the use of gas blowers for all contractors except for the town of Brookline will be devastating to local small businesses. I've worked hard over the last 10 years to build my business. I've employed Brookline College students and those who have chosen this as their profession. My crews are mostly minorities and women. This is an opportunity for them to make an excellent pay and care for their families. If I'm unable to run my crews for the spring and fall cleanup, I am going to have to shut down. Now, I just want to comment on the battery-operated leaf blowers and the one that he showed, because you're not comparing apples to apples or something that a landscape company would actually use in the field versus a gasoline-powered leaf blower. I do believe that the battery-operated leaf blowers are fine for the summer, and that's why I helped craft that warrant article. They clear light debris, and we use small ones for our work. And so does, what's really great is the Public Works Department got on board, and they're doing it too. But they're still using the gas-powered leaf blowers for the heavy cleanup. They have to. And in fact, they're allowed to use the Red Max, which are way over the 67 decibel, because they have so much work to do. They don't just do the parks or places far away. They do the entire streets of Brookline. And you all, I'm sure, have seen them, the big trucks, the leaf blowers. They blow all the leaves out into the street. They load them in the trucks. They have a whole process that they do. It's quite noisy, but they get it done. Our streets are clean, and our storm drains are clean. So speaking of Public Works, they are, just as I said, exempt, and they would be exempt from this bylaw too. And I'm wondering how one class of people would not be allowed to do their job because of this restrictive bylaw. I know that the Attorney General has to approve our bylaws, and I really wonder how she would feel about this one. So I mentioned that battery leaf blowers really can't pick up this spring and summer cleanup, and that little one that they showed that's handheld, if you can imagine walking around with a handheld one for 9 hours a day or 8 hours a day, that's pretty rough. These are, our blowers go on our back, and we're aided with sort of a elbow that help carries the weight of the blower. And so I started looking into, again, the best landscape type battery-powered leaf blower that we would use. And I'm going to give you a handout afterwards from Steel. And it comes to about, sorry, $900, the batteries are $900 each. The batteries run on high for about an hour. So if we had maybe 7 or 8 batteries for each blower for my crews, that would be 6 blowers. It's almost $60,000 investment for me, which I really would not be able to handle. And I would say this is a crushing amount for a small business, but some of these guys here have the biggest businesses in town. And I can't imagine them trying to outfit their crews. But why even do it? Because those aren't going to pick up the leaves in the fall and the spring. So other quick things to consider, that landscape companies pulling out of Brookline, residents won't be able to clear their properties. Those same men and women who are doing that job also do snow removal. They pull out of Brookline, there will be less people to do snow removal. It's really hard now to find people to do snow removal. If residents find companies that will rake, there may be smaller yards, their maintenance bills will skyrocket. And last time around, there were many statements that were made by people who support a ban, and I just want to quickly hit those. One is, why don't you just hire more people to rake? That'll be great for the economy. Well, the truth is there's a tremendous lack of employable people who want to work in this industry. The government has made it very hard for people who used to do this work to be able to do this work. So landscapers, as people who run restaurants, who have cleaning services, are finding it almost impossible to find employees. Another thing people would say, we raked our leaves when I was a kid. Why can't everybody rake their leaves? Well, when I was a kid, the trees were smaller here in Brookline. We have really big old trees with a huge, huge leaf drop. They shed a lot of leaves. So I think in about a month, you're going to start remembering how many leaves we have here in Brookline. Most young families don't have time to rake, and older folks need our help. So raking leaves is not an option for companies like mine that serve multiple properties in one day. I wouldn't ask my workers to rake leaves for 9 hours a day. The other thing is, why do you need to remove leaves? Isn't mulching good for beds? Yes, mulching is great for beds. We leave some leaves in the beds, but heavy wet leaves invite pests and fungus. We actually remove the leaves, we get them made into mulch, and then we actually sell them back to the customers. It's a beautiful thing. And we put that mulch in the spring back into their beds. Regarding the emissions, there is an article online that has gone viral about leaf blower emissions equaling those of a RAV4. And it was done by Edmunds, actually, which is a car magazine, and so I'm not sure what they were doing that. But a lot of opponents of leaf blowers point to this article, and I'm going to give you a handout that's a rebuttal of it, because it was a very flawed test. And actually, from our work on the committee, we found that nationwide, leaf blowers are, I think it's 0.038% of everything that makes emissions. So we all want to do better to cut emissions, and I would be happy to make the switch once a machine is developed that can handle our heavy leaves and is a reasonable price.
Can I ask a
Do you guys have any questions for me?
I do. Mr. Warner compared the style gas blower, which has an output of 540 cubic feet per minute, to an electric one at 600 cubic feet per minute. The blowers that you use, what type of output do they have?
I think somebody else from my industry can help me answer that better, because blowers are also now, they're measuring them in a different, can somebody help me?
Yeah, a lot of them are. Can you come up to the microphone?
But there's no compare of what he was showing between the two items.
Introduce yourself to our TV audience.
Vinny Mastriani. I run a company which my dad started in '51, so we've been servicing Brookline since 1951. And, I grew up through all the ages of the, blowers becoming more advanced and everything changing. And the fact is that there is nothing adequate for us to use yet, battery operated. Some of these elaborate properties that we maintain in the Clyde Street area, Heath Street, Fernwood, these things are acres. There's just no way possible to maintain them. It's basically a toy. It's just not feasible.
So do you use something greater than
We're using
600
some
CPM?
battery operated now, and, I'm trying to educate my clients and tell them we're facing this issue of possibly no blower. I think the law that went in effect with restricting us, giving us the spring cleanup and the fall cleanup, and then restricting nothing in the summer was pretty devastating to us. And it's not just, it's not just us, it's tree companies, it's, a lot of people use a blower to clean up. Parking lot companies, before they come in and stripe, they gotta blow the place down. So unfortunately, we get the brunt of it, but it affects a lot of other people.
My question has to do with whether the blowers that you use are comparable to
Not
the
even
style.
close.
Okay, so in terms
Well, the ones that we use move at a higher volume. They don't make anything that we can use that will replace that blower that we currently use.
the gas blowers
The gas
you use
blower.
are at what output level?
Say that again, I'm sorry?
The gas blowers that you use are at what output level?
Like Faith said, they change because so many of these companies now are trying to use this, they're trying to make almost like a baffle system on it to try to knock that noise down. Some of them have worked, but I'm not for me to say a number, I don't think I would be giving you something accurate. Yeah, we can get you something. I think what I'm saying is the option of nothing is going to be devastating because there's just going to be no way to do it. And obviously, if the town is going to be exempt from the law, it means they can't do it either. So I'm sure we can come up with something. I mean, I think we just took a pretty devastating blow with nothing for the summer. So to strip us of one of our main tools is going to be pretty devastating.
Okay.
And it's really pinpointing kind of one, you know.
Mr. Heller, Ms. Heller.
So far, we focused on the first article that Mr. Warner talked about, but I'm wondering about the second article, which is that the companies not blow the stuff into the street or on a neighbor's property.
Yeah.
And it used to be when we all had rakes and we cleaned the leaves up, we made a big pile for ourselves in our own driveway, and then we scooped them up and, you know, put them but I have to admit, it does irk me when I see landscapers blowing the stuff into the street or onto somebody else's property. Just inconsiderate and unfortunate.
Yeah.
And so what is your position about that?
I mean, that's misuse of the individual. So, I mean, we try to, explain to our employees to try not to do that and be respectful of people riding by on a bicycle or walking by. So, from what I see of our employees, they do a pretty good job because especially with everything being so touch and go, I think we've been more on top of them about that, being respectful and trying to use it as least as possible. So, I mean, on an individual basis like that, for me to speak to somebody else's misuse is very, I can't. Yeah. You can actually take
So,
that.
thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope some of the other landscapers will speak also, but regarding the second article, I prepared a pamphlet of good best practices, and I have it in my truck, and I drive around, and when I see somebody doing something like that, I will often jump out, and it's in 3 different languages, and I speak to them, and they get it. So there are always going to be people not doing what they're supposed to do. We've done a pretty good job of educating people and trying to get people to change. The thing I worry about this warrant article is that we actually do a big service for the town of Brookline. We clear storm drains, and we clear our clients' sidewalks. So if you say to us, you cannot be blowing on public way, we're not going to be able to perform that service for the town of Brookline. And
I'm more concerned about the streets. Blowing stuff into the street.
The street, yeah, the
Or
sidewalk is
onto a
public
neighbor's
and
yard or whatever.
Yeah. So, I think it's a good question for Erin in Public Works and Parks Department, because she and I have actually spoken about this. So we work hand in hand. So.
Yeah, I would like to have, to hear Erin in the future weigh in on this as well. I would just say, like, having, and I think it's more comment, but just having read through our current regulations, it seems like there has been compromise made between people's ability to, for the most of the year, live without this noise, and for companies and to be able to do this work, and for property owners to be able to have their their property cleared. I do think also, and this seems to be something that keeps coming up around different issues for us, is enforcement. And certainly, and I probably should be making some phone calls myself, but I've heard folks blowing right behind my window, this probably most of the summer. And so we've got to maybe start to rethink, because I think that's when we start having warrant articles like this come forward, because I know there's some questions about emissions and stuff like that, but it seems to be the noise that's the issue, and the noise when it's not supposed to be there. And so for those of you that are landscapers in the room, and I'm sure no one here is blowing during the periods when they're not supposed to be, but maybe for those folks who are watching who sometimes do, I mean, that's something that maybe we should be looking at as a town, is how we can better manage this enforcement, and whether or not we need to start banning repeat offenders that continue to do this despite our best efforts in letting people, passing the right bylaws and letting people know what they are. But you know, I haven't heard anything so far that would indicate to me that that what we have right now necessarily needs changing.
By the way, one question. The Warrant Article 23 doesn't prohibit you from going into the street or sidewalk to blow leaves off, as I understand it. Is that correct?
I don't know, the way you can ask the petitioner, but we're not allowed to blow leaves.
Into the street, but you can go into the street and blow them off, I would say,
Onto the property.
onto the property.
So, I mean,
They wouldn't do that.
I don't have an answer for that.
Okay.
But,
I think more people want to speak.
yeah, please.
Yes.
No, just, hi, Michael Bonadio. My father started the company in 1963, and we've been servicing clients in the Brookline area since. In regards to Article the 23, blowing into the street, picking up better practices like Faith mentioned, you know, that's almost the same as someone speeding and, you know, enforcing a speeding law. It'll happen, you know, you just should enforce the speeder and not, you know, you wouldn't allow them to drive on the street. So if you train your employees properly to not blow into the street, to collect the leaves, we clean the sidewalks. Brookline residents, or my clients, have a high level expectation, and they like their properties clean. And they want that gutter and they want that street cleaned. And it's no way not to blow into the street or towards the sidewalk to clean up at that time. Back to your question on 22, the picture of the blower that was shown, it says 540 CFM, and that yellow DeWalt was only 400 CFM. You could quickly Google it and find those stats. Not only that, but a gas blower will last an hour. The battery lasts an hour. You fill the blower back up and you continue to go, where it takes several hours to charge a battery. And to have several batteries is very expensive too. So it's more than just the size and the weight. It's an efficiency, productivity with labor, cost of labor rising, being efficient. We couldn't charge our clients enough to remove their leaves. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments from the audience? Mr. Richardson.
Richmond. Good evening, Board. Clint Richmond, Precinct 6. I'm here representing also the Green Caucus. Since 2011, we've endorsed all restrictions on leaf blowers that have been proposed to date, and I strongly expect the caucus will endorse this one, both of these as well. As you heard and as you know, decarbonizing has been a trend here in town at recent town meetings. This is just another continuation of that trend to move from the combustion of fossil fuels to electric powered motors. There are a lot of health issues with leaf blowers. I mean, I think we need to be, I think we're overusing them to date, and I think there's opportunities through best practices and that have been mentioned and other ways to not use them so much. In addition to the combustion byproducts, these Category 5 hurricane force winds blow existing particulates, which consist of toxic road and tire dust, litter and allergens such as fungi, and these are blown not just into the faces of passers-by on the sidewalk, but the smallest particles can be suspended in the air for weeks at a time. And these are very small particles that can get into your lungs, so we don't want these being stirred up. This is why we need the sidewalk ban. These health risks affect most the landscape staff, so one would think they might want to be working with us on this issue, but also the abutters. Now, my daughter has asthma, and she was exposed to this when she was at home. I mean, landscapers are very respectful of pedestrians, but stopping for a few seconds while someone walks by doesn't alleviate the problem of these suspended microparticles. We've heard a lot about the noise. I work at home too. There's a lot of frustrations among residents around compliance with the existing bylaw. It's not working. I have a long list of seasonal violations. it's impossible for me to report noise violations. I can't run over there and inspect the equipment, but I see Red Max models all the time, and there's not a single model that complies with our noise limits. Anyway, I've stopped keeping my list. I've quit calling the police. So these statistics are misleading in the sense that they're down because it's pointless to call. The inspector can't get to the scene in time. We're counting on the landscape community to self-police. There's a lot of them. Maybe they can't reach them all. But I think if the message becomes simpler and that never use your gas-powered leaf blower in Brookline, I think it'll be a lot easier. Today, on my trip to the T, and I live in this neighborhood. We don't have a neighborhood of big homes. This was at a small yard at a condo. 2 weeks before the seasonal ban goes into effect, the guy had his gas-powered leaf blower out. So other jurisdictions have banned gas-powered leaf blowers completely, so we don't have the strongest laws today in the country. I think it will help significantly with compliance of the laws. I said with regard to the dates, it's a much simpler message. We'll send a message about sustainability. This is a compromise as far as some people are concerned. I mean, people have different sensitivities to noise, so I think it's important to respect that. It will lead to sustainably powered, lower speed and quieter models. With regard to the town exemption, the town is already moving to quieter and electric models. I expect they will comply eventually, and if they don't, we can have future legislation. But, you know, we're trying to do this in a stepwise fashion. And to address the question that Member Green mentioned, the Red Max EBZ 8500 goes 206 miles per hour, that's above Category 5, and 900 cubic feet per minute. So it's 50% stronger than the models you saw. Now, those aren't allowed in Brookline, but you'll see, as I said, Red Max all the time. It's standard equipment for a lot of landscapers for the reasons they mentioned, but they're not allowed today, but we still see them. So thank you very much.
Can I just, Clint, before you go, the electric ones we'd still have the issue with particles being blown into the air, right?
Correct.
With the electric versions.
They're not as forceful, and then combined with the sidewalk ban, and they kind of work together, will keep them from being blown off the roadways. I think we need to say, you know, we need another solution for that, or it's DPW who's keeping our roads clean. It's not, I mean, the town does hire private landscape companies to clean the sidewalks at the beginning of the season, for example, to get the winter debris off. But, you know, most of our street debris is done by, you know, the machines that have the rotating brushes and so forth. And those aren't 200-mile-an-hour products. Okay. And they're usually running them at 2 in the morning too, so there's not any pedestrians out.
Street sweepers.
Pardon me?
Street sweepers.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Hi there. Name is Bob Marzilli. Company's RP Marzilli. Actually, my grandfather started working in Brookline about 1918, and we've continuously had a landscape business going in the town. Don't live in the town. My company does comply with the regulations. We do have battery powered. We have electric. We use those when we're supposed to use them. We've been written up for not having the right ones. We paid tickets for it, so we learn the hard way. I do sympathize with the noise. I do believe that it's going to be pretty soon. That I was on the phone today with Steele because I belong to the National Association of Landscape Professionals, and we're working hard with Steele to actually come up with a better battery to come up, and I think in 1 to 3 years you're going to see those really hitting the market, so that they're going to be effective in the Northeast, which has the heaviest, heaviest tree cover in the country. So we do need something with a little bit more juice than what is offered right now. It's getting better by the day. We are always training, schooling our people to make sure they don't blow it on the street. If they do, they pick up everything after them. And again, it's constant policing on our part. But we have, you know, we've abided by the limited times now. We're looking to be able to use the heavy equipment in peak season, when it's needed, to effectively clean both streets and private properties, and do it quickly, and do it when, you know, when it's peak leaf fall and peak cleanup in the spring. So if we can continue on with the way we have it for right now, that'd be great. If the manufacturers would help us a little bit and get the right equipment in here for us, we'd be all the more grateful to them too. Thank you.
So any other comments, questions? Okay, from the board? Okay, seeing none, we will close this hearing. And that, I believe, is the last, no, we have a couple other things on the agenda. Oh, boards and commissions, appointments. So we're going to make appointments to diversity, inclusion, and community relations, even though I said that we would make the appointments later. Of course, it is later in the evening, so I didn't lie. And I don't think that either of these applicants will be turned down, so there's nothing that we're doing that would impede there.
I think somebody still wants to speak.
Jeff,
Pete Gately, Brookline Landscape Company, been here.
tell me your name again.
Pete Gately.
You might want to speak right into the mic.
Yeah, that may help. I've been in the landscape business here in town for 35 plus years. Been a resident of this town since 1952. Own property in this town. And we comply with the rules that are going on right now. We do clean the sidewalks and the streets in front of the houses that we do our cleanups at, both spring and fall. We do clean out the yards. Going to less effective equipment or raking properties is only going to cost the homeowners and taxpayers of this town a lot more money. We also do their snow removal. If we're pushed out of business, then we don't do their snow removal anymore. We do roadways in this town, private roadways, that is, parking lots, churches. We take care of a lot of property with a lot of acreage. And there's only so many people that can do, that are available to work and do this job right now. That's about all.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, Mr. Chair, so I'll walk you through these three committees that have action required this evening. The first is the Commission for Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations, and in this case, we have 5 vacancies. So there are plenty of vacancies and not as many people to fill, but we did get 2 applicants that you interviewed this evening. So I'm going to list their names, and if you would indicate your willingness to appoint them, say yay or nay. First is Mariah Nobrega.
Yay.
Yay. Yay.
And Eloise Lawrence.
Yay. Yay.
All right, so we're going to provide them with 3-year terms expiring in 2021. The Commission for Women is the next commission, and there is a reappointment of Dr. Gloria Rudish, who's a longtime member who would like to be reappointed. Now, for whatever reason, we haven't acted on this for a couple of years, so I'd like to update this and
before my time
provide Ms. Rudish with a 3-year term expiring in I think 2021, please. So Gloria Rudish for reappointment. Okay, and then we have another applicant, Felina Robinson, and again, she would be appointed to fill a term expiring in 2021. Felina Robinson.
Yeah.
Aye.
Okay, now we come to the Pierce Building Committee, and you've already appointed and established a committee, as was mentioned, they're meeting in their initial meeting tomorrow morning, but there was one slot that wasn't resolved at the time we did reach agreement on this, and then the other one is that we have a new school superintendent. So what I would like to suggest is the board adopt or revote this composition of this committee as it's listed on your packet, labeled number 14A, which includes Ben Lummis, our acting superintendent, or interim superintendent of schools, in place of the prior superintendent, and then the appointment of Carol Levin, who's a current member of the advisory committee, who was not on the prior prior version you appointed. So I would recommend you take a vote to appoint this slate of candidates that appears on this sheet.
Are you about this
Yes.
process?
Yes. I'm here for the Commission for Women.
Okay, we've already gone there, so let's finish what we're doing.
Okay.
Then. So we're voting on a slate.
For the Pierce School Building Committee, yes.
So all in favor, I guess?
Yeah.
Aye.
Move to approve.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, Ms. McClellan.
I'm here, I guess, representing the Commission for Women, just happened to be here, but I believe we had two other people who were up for appointment, Elizabeth Stillman, and I'm sorry, I didn't hear if you actually appointed Hadassah Margolis.
We appointed Felina Robinson, and who was the other one?
Stillman.
Elizabeth Stillman, who's here.
I'm sorry, I didn't have that on the list, and I apologize for that. I don't.
Yeah, she was on the list.
Yeah, I do
Yeah.
recognize it.
Yeah.
It wasn't on the list that was here for me this evening, so I'm sure you're right, and
It's not posted, so
could
we
we
can't-
take it up next week?
Sure.
It wasn't posted, so we really can't vote on it tonight.
Her name wasn't on the agenda.
Right.
And
It will be
Hadassah
next week.
Margolis is not either.
Well, wait a minute, none of the names are on the agenda.
Right, I don't remember, I just saw the Commission.
Yeah. I think
You
we can
could,
vote,
you
yeah.
could. I'm sorry, I apologize, because obviously we want to appoint everybody who was, but
So why don't we vote on those two?
Hold on one second. So,
Well, we voted on Gloria Rudish and Felina
yeah,
Robinson.
so I guess what I'm looking at is I want to make sure that we're not appointing more people than is allowed on the
You're
commission.
definitely not.
Well, let me get, yeah, so I'm reading that, and I'm reading that the commission shall consist of 11 members, so
Yeah, we have 4.
5, 6, 7, so we have, as you
You
said,
got
4.
space.
So if those are, do you recall, Kate, those names?
I have an email from the chair, the acting chair of the Commission for Women that, and Select Board Member Green was copied on that as well, if that helps to read the names, but.
Yeah, I remember.
That would
Okay.
be helpful, yeah.
But it's still not posted.
Yep.
Well, none of the names.
None of the
are
names.
posted.
It just says the Commission for Women.
On the agenda.
Would you mind saying those names again, please?
Yes, so per the acting chair, as we discussed, the commission welcomes the appointment of Hadassah Margolis,
Yep.
Felina Robinson, whom you already voted on, and Elizabeth Stillman, who's here.
Well, I certainly do recall those interviews being made, and so I have no problem. If there is a problem, I'll correct it next week. So why don't we,
Thank you.
I'll put those two names in for your consideration. Hadassah Margolis,
Aye.
Elizabeth Stillman.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. McClellan, even though you interrupted our proceeding.
For a good reason.
All right, he needed to be. Okay.
That's it.
Oh, yes. Meeting adjourned.